Hey guys, tonight we're trudging through thick yellow fog, trying not to step in horse manure while the distant clip-clop of hooves echoes off soot-blackened brick. Victorian London is grimy, bustling, and just a little bit terrifying. But don't worry, you probably won't survive this. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe. But only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And if you're still awake, post your location and local time in the comments. I love seeing where everyone's listening from. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You take your first breath of London air and immediately regret it. It's like inhaling damp smoke through a wool sock. The fog is so thick it feels like it's pressing against your eyeballs, and you can't quite tell if it's late morning or the apocalypse. You're not alone, of course. Hundreds of others move alongside you, some in fancy hats and heavy coats, most in patched clothes and muddy boots. Somewhere between the factory bells and the church tolls, you lose your sense of time. The streets are paved with cobblestones and disappointment. Mud, straw, and the occasional unidentifiable substance suck at your boots. You're not quite sure if that puddle is water, beer, or the ghost of someone's breakfast. The air smells like burnt coal, damp wool, and something sour you really don't want to trace. Somewhere nearby, someone empties a chamber pot out a window with a warning shout. Garde low, but you still get splashed. This is 19th century urban planning at its finest. Just dense enough to spread disease, just open enough to let cold drafts in. Even in the wealthier districts, the soot clings to everything. No amount of lace curtains or decorative gas lamps can distract from the fact that you're basically living inside a chimney. You pass a man yelling about radishes. Another is selling dead songbirds from a rickety cart. A woman with no teeth offers you a love potion that smells like gin and regret. You decline, but politely. It's best not to offend anyone on these streets. They might be your neighbour or your undertaker. Victorian fog is more than just weather. It's a lifestyle. London's infamous pea soupers are thick with soot from countless coal fires. Historians still argue whether the fog was entirely due to industrial pollution or if natural atmospheric conditions made things worse. Either way, visibility drops to just a few feet. It's like walking through the inside of an old kettle. People routinely bump into lampposts, horses, and each other. You squint ahead and see two figures emerge from the murk. Nope, just one. The other's a pile of rags on a crate, or possibly a very patient dog. For most Londoners, your day starts and ends in this cold haze. Gaslight flickers like a dying firefly above the street, barely illuminating the way. The soft hiss of gas escaping from pipes sounds oddly like whispering. You try not to think about that too much. As you walk past a row of brick houses, you hear coughing from every window. Tuberculosis, bronchitis, coal lung, take your pick. It's a full buffet of respiratory misery. Some residents tie handkerchiefs around their mouths. Others simply accept that lungs are optional. You do your best to breathe shallowly, which makes walking uphill a fun little game called Will I Pass Out or Just Stumble? If you're really unlucky, you might spot the rag and bone man, part recycler, part omen. He collects old rags, bones, and scrap metal in a cart that squeaks like it's haunted. Children trail behind him, hoping for coins or curses. There's a rumor that he knows when people are about to die, which is probably why everyone avoids eye contact. You stop at a street corner where an open sewer grate bubbles ominously. The smell is creative. A blend of human waste, animal runoff, and whatever died under the cobblestones last week. Your eyes water. Your stomach does a polite backflip. A nearby sign proudly declares the street has been recently cleaned. A term that, in Victorian context, means hosed vaguely with cold water. Of course, this is also the age of rapid change. Steam engines rumble in the distance, and newspapers shout from every newsboy's lips. You hear a boy yelling the headlines. New tunnel under the Thames. Queen's dog bites footman. Cholera strikes again. You give the boy a nod. He looks about 8 and has already seen more than you'll see in a year. Not all the smells are terrible. A bakery somewhere is making crusty loaves, and you follow your nose like a cartoon mouse. The scent is a momentary gift. Yeasty, warm, alive. Then it's gone again, swallowed by the stench of the city. You pass a line of carriages, their horses drooping like wet laundry. A coachman lights a cigarette with a long match and nods at you without expression. The horses shuffle in place, clinking their tack and dropping little packages behind them. The city has over 300 horses, and each produces about 20 pounds of manure a day. Do the math. Or don't. It's better for your peace of mind. A muffled piano plays from somewhere inside a house. A stray cat stalks across your path, its tail like a question mark. You don't trust it. It's too clean. It's clearly working for someone, probably a spy for the chimney sweeps union. And then there's the soot. Always the soot. It clings to your clothes, your hair, your eyelashes. You wipe your nose, and the handkerchief comes away grey. Some households hang damp sheets outside the windows to catch it before it enters. Others just give up and embrace the Gothic aesthetic. Still, there's something weirdly comforting in the rhythm of the street. You adjust your scarf, step over a crate, and keep walking. The fog wraps around you like a scratchy blanket, and somewhere in the distance, Big Ben tolls the hour. You have no idea which one, but it hardly matters. Time doesn't move the same here. It's a loop of footsteps, soot, and the occasional cry of murder, followed by someone saying, "Eh," probably just a dogfight. And yet, people survive. They laugh sometimes. They fall in love under gas lamps and argue about cricket and read penny dreadfuls by firelight. You keep moving because that's what London demands. One slow, fog-choked step at a time. You duck into a side alley to escape a cabbage cart barreling. By, its wheels shrieking like banshees. Your boots squelch into something that definitely isn't cabbage, and you try not to think too hard about what just soaked through your soul. Ahead of you, a stairway disappears into a darkened door. You recognize this place. Home sweet home. Or more accurately, the one narrow attic room you share with 3 other people and an aggressively judgmental pigeon. It's not much, but in Victorian London, you don't expect luxury. You climb the steps, carefully avoiding the broken one, second from the top, still smells like someone's bathwater, and duck through a warped wooden door. The ceiling slopes so low you bang your head if you stretch. The window is single-paned and rattles every time someone sneezes outside. There's no insulation, but there is mold, lots of it, climbing like ivy over the walls in lovely dark green. Streaks. The room is barely big enough for one bed, and one bed is all you get. Shared, of course. Your roommates are already here. One is asleep, mouth open, snoring like a tea kettle with asthma. The second is brushing crumbs out of his coat and humming something that might be a sea shanty. The third sits by the window, watching the street with a faraway look that says, "I have accepted despair and made it my pen pal." Privacy isn't a thing here. If someone changes clothes, you politely look away, but let's be real. There's only one corner to face, and you've all seen each other's knees by now. You keep your belongings, what little you have, in a cracked biscuit tin beneath the mattress. A hairbrush, one clean sock, a letter from your sister, and a stub of wax you use as a candle on especially dark nights. You breathe in deeply. Mistake. The room smells like unwashed bodies, old tea, and damp plaster. Still, it's better than the street. For now. Victorian London housing is a free-for-all. Tenement buildings spring up with dizzying speed, cramming as many humans as possible into what used to be storage closets. Wealthier areas hide their poor behind alleys or behind the house quarters. Historians still argue whether landlords deliberately ignored safety codes or whether such codes even existed in a meaningful way. Either way, fire escapes are more of a rumor than a reality. You lie down on the bed, well, not on it, more like near it. Every creak and groan of the mattress sounds like it's making its will. The straw inside shifts under your weight and something sharp pokes your side. Possibly a spring. Possibly a mouse. You try not to move too much so you don't wake your snoring roommate, who has a tendency to mutter strange things when disturbed. Last week, he sleep-argued with a ghost about bread prices. The floors are so thin you can hear every argument from below. A man yelling about a lost shoe. A woman accusing someone of stealing her wash basin. A baby crying. Always crying. Babies in Victorian London have no chill. It's like they're trying to win a competition. From the room next door, someone plays a harmonica. Badly. You respect the effort, though. Your building leans ever so slightly, like it's shy or drunk. Cracks spread across the ceiling like river maps. Rainwater drips through on especially bad nights, and there's a bucket in the corner that catches it with surprising musicality. You once tried to tune it by placing spoons inside. The results were avant-garde. During the colder months, the room becomes a battleground. You all argue about who gets to sleep closest to the bed's center, where the warmth lingers longest. Whoever loses has to sleep near the window, where the frost forms elaborate floral patterns you pretend are decorative. Your breath fogs in, the air like a tiny ghost. You wrap yourself in your coat and a wool blanket that smells like pickled onions. Noise never really stops. Horse hooves clatter below. Someone laughs too loudly at something not funny. A dog barks. Somewhere far off, church bells ring in the wrong key. You stare at the ceiling and hope the pigeon outside doesn't come in again. It still hasn't forgiven you for knocking over its eggs last week. You didn't mean to. You were trying to hang laundry and the line snapped. Victorian laundry, by the way, is a full-body workout that requires boiled water, soap, the texture of gravel, and the forearms of a prize fighter. The room holds memories, though. Shared biscuits on payday. Quiet moments when the street outside actually sleeps. You once saw snow fall through the window. Real snow, white and fluffy, not the sooty sludge you usually get. For a minute, it was like magic. Then it melted through the cracks and ruined someone's socks. But still, a moment. In wealthier homes across the city, bedrooms come with furniture, carpets, even fireplaces. You've heard tales of such extravagance, people having rooms for guests, for books, for dressing. Imagine needing a whole room just to put clothes on. You change under your coat while standing on one foot like a sad stork. Dressing areas are for people who don't step in sewage before breakfast. Even so, you take care of what little you have. You once embroidered your only shirt's collar to hide a tear. It looks like an accidental chicken now, but you're oddly proud of it. Personal touches matter. Some nights, you light your stub of wax and read a page or two from a borrowed serial. You never find out how the stories end. Someone else always needs the book next. But the mystery is part of the fun. There's a small mirror nailed to the wall, and you glance at it now. Your reflection is smudged and tired-looking, but determined. You smooth your hair with a spit-dampened palm. It's a losing battle, but you try. Outside, the city groans with life. Someone yells, "Oi!" and a crash follows. You don't flinch anymore. You lie back down and close your eyes. The room hums with quiet suffering, but also with something else, persistence. You may not have privacy. You may not have comfort, but you have a space, however imperfect. And in Victorian London, that's a small miracle. You wake before the sun does. Not because you want to, but because someone below is hammering something metal, and the bed frame has decided to become sentient and creaky again. The fog outside has thickened overnight. It seeps through the window frame like it's trying to join your morning routine. You pull on your boots, still damp from yesterday, and prepare for the daily adventure of surviving a Victorian morning. There's no running water in the building, of course. You grab a battered tin pail and shuffle down 3 flights of stairs to the communal water pump located in the courtyard. The pump handle sticks, and the water comes out sullenly, like it resents being disturbed. It smells faintly of iron and cabbage, but hey, hydration is hydration. You splash a bit on your face, instantly regretting it. The water is ice cold, and your skin feels like it might crack in protest. You attempt to scrub with a rag that was once a towel in a past life. A group of pigeons watches you from the rooftop, clearly judging your technique. One coughs. Or maybe that was just a person. It's hard to tell, honestly. Your teeth-brushing ritual consists of chewing a twig. Yes, a twig, a frayed bit of wood, is as close as you get to dental hygiene, unless you're one of the elite few with access to tooth powder made from crushed chalk or charcoal. Historians still argue whether these early dental concoctions helped or destroyed your teeth faster. The results, frankly, weren't dazzling either way. Breakfast isn't a guarantee. On good days, someone might have a heel of bread to share, or a splash of weak tea that's been reused so many times, it's more like hot leaf water with trust issues. You chew slowly, not because it's delicious, but because it stretches the illusion that you've eaten something substantial. You wrap yourself in your coat, it's been patched so many times it resembles a quilt, and prepare to head out. Your destination depends on your luck, your skill set, and how loudly your stomach growls. Some days you find work at the factory. Other days you join the small army of people standing outside warehouses, hoping to be picked for the day's labor. It's the Victorian version of gig work, but without the Wi-Fi or dignity. As you move through the streets, the city begins to stir. Milkmen clink bottles onto steps. Street sweepers, those poor souls, shove mounds of manure and garbage into carts with long-handled brooms. The carts already overflow by mid-morning. London has over 2 million residents now, and with each of them producing waste, it's less. Keep the streets clean, and more, keep them barely passable. If you're lucky, or unlucky, depending on how you see it, you might end up at a match factory. You've heard the horror stories. Young girls, some barely teenagers, dipping wooden sticks into white phosphorus. After enough exposure, their jawbones rot from the inside out. The condition is called phossy jaw, and it glows faintly in the dark, like something out of a ghost story. Workers hide their symptoms for as long as they can. Being sick means being replaceable. Historians still debate whether the factory owners genuinely didn't understand the risks, or just found it convenient to ignore them. You pass one of those factories now. The windows are too small, the smoke billows out like the building is exhaling stress, and you glimpse a pale face at one of the upper panes. She stares down at you like she knows you'll be in her place one day. Then there's the textile mill, an endless thrum of looms powered by steam and desperation. Children scurry beneath the machinery to retrieve fallen threads, often losing fingers, or worse, in the process. You don't have that kind of nimbleness, so you stick to loading carts and sweeping lint that clings to your lungs like cobwebs. On your way, you stop briefly at a soup kitchen run by a local charity. They serve what they call bone broth, which mostly tastes like sadness with a hint of potato. Still, it's warm, and the metal spoon feels like a tiny luxury. You trade half your portion for a wax paper wrapper that you plan to use later as a window patch. That's Victorian bartering for you. You nod to a man playing a concertina near the curb. He's missing an eye and plays a tune that sounds like a drunk lullaby. You throw him a coin, and he smiles, a real smile, with almost 3 teeth behind it. It's oddly comforting. Then comes the workhouse. You haven't gone there yet, but you pass by it, just in case today is the day you run out of options. The building looms like a grim promise, its windows narrow and its front gate bolted tight. People enter looking thin. They come out even, thinner, usually with their dignity scraped off somewhere along the laundry line. Inside, conditions are rigid, families separated, meals portioned by the ounce, labor endless. Historians still argue whether the workhouse was meant as a last resort safety net or a tool for social discipline. Either way, the message is clear. Only the truly desperate belong there. You take a detour through a market lane. Someone sells meat pies from a cart. You know better than to ask what kind of meat. The smell is equal parts inviting and suspicious. A woman sells ribbons next to a man offering tooth extraction while you wait, with what looks like a pair of tongs. You decide to keep walking. A newsboy shouts today's headline: "New sewer reforms passed, rats indifferent." You chuckle under your breath. Even in this place, sarcasm survives. You finally arrive at the day's job. A brick hauling site near the river. You sign your name in chalk, grab a worn canvas sling, and start lugging heavy loads back and forth. It's repetitive, grueling, but it's better than nothing. Your arms ache, your spine protests. By mid-morning, you can't feel your shoulders. You keep going anyway, because in Victorian London, rest isn't just rare, it's expensive. As the fog begins to lift, weak sunlight filters through, lighting the river in a murky silver. You pause for a second and watch a barge drift by. Two boys wave from it. You wave back. Your hands are raw and your clothes hang damp, but in this moment, there's a sliver of peace. The whistle blows. Breaks over. You take one more breath, adjust your sling, and get back to work. Your back screams in protest as you finish hauling the last load of bricks for the day. You stretch, carefully, because one wrong move and your spine might sound like a bag of cracking walnuts, and step away from the work site. The air is thick with soot and the taste of metal. The fog hasn't so much lifted as reshaped itself into a sort of greasy curtain, clinging to everything. You wipe your brow with your sleeve and, like clockwork, smear grime across your face. It's a Victorian skincare routine, coal dust exfoliation with a hint of industrial despair. You join the slow-moving crowd shuffling down the road. Time to wander back through the markets and narrow alleys. You don't have the luxury of a bathhouse nearby, but you pass one anyway. A public wash, painted with flaking blue letters and a peeling sign that promises cleanliness, 3D. You consider it, but 3p is 3p, and, right now, you'd rather eat. Still, the idea lingers. Bathing in Victorian London isn't so much a daily ritual as a semi-annual event. For the working poor, water access is limited and expensive. Many households share one tin bath, which is dragged out on Sundays and filled with kettle after kettle of boiled water. By the time it's your turn, the water looks like weak tea someone sobbed into. And you share it. Siblings, parents, even the occasional boarder. There's a reason the saying goes, "Don't throw the baby out with the bathwater." You genuinely might not see them under the muck. But hey, at least you don't smell alone. You duck into a side alley and find a familiar water barrel behind a bakery. It's technically rainwater, and definitely not clean, but you splash your hands and face anyway. A cat watches you from atop a crate, tail flicking with quiet judgment. You nod politely. That cat has seen things. You once saw it chase off a terrier with nothing but a hiss and a death glare. The streets hum with energy as evening approaches. Market vendors shout the last of their deals. 6 apples for a shilling, 5 if you don't ask questions. A fishmonger yells something you can't understand through his enormous moustache, but it involves eels and honest weight. You pass a stall selling fried whelks, the smell of vinegar and seawater sharp in the air. You grimace. Your stomach rumbles. It's tempting. Instead, you stop at a pie seller and squint at the options. Mystery meat it is. You hand over your coin and accept the lukewarm pastry. The crust flakes barely, and the inside is something. Tastes vaguely like rat and regret. You don't complain. Somewhere nearby, someone's singing. Off-key, sure, but the melody is sweet. It's one of those old work songs you half remember from childhood, about rivers and faraway fields. A woman hums along as she scrubs a stoop, her hands red and raw. She pauses to swat a boy trying to steal her wash bucket. You give him a look, and he vanishes into the crowd. Like smoke. Like a good pickpocket. You're lucky your coat is still on your back. As you continue walking, you notice the air changing. Thicker, somehow. You've entered one of London's famous fog pockets. The kind that makes your eyelashes damp and your lungs wheeze. It's not just weather. It's the smog stew of coal smoke, factory exhaust, and chimney soot. They call it pea soup fog. Sometimes it's greenish, other times yellow. Historians still argue whether it was entirely caused by pollution or made worse by the city's unique geography and damp climate. Either way, you feel like you're walking through a smoke-filled teacup. You cough, once, twice. Someone nearby coughs back. It's almost like a greeting. You pass by a chimney sweep. Just a boy, really, maybe 9 years old. His face is pitch black with soot, his eyes too old for his body. He carries a bundle of brushes and tools, the kind designed to scrape chimneys too narrow for any adult to fit inside. Children were sent up those tight flues because they were small and expendable. Injuries, burns, even suffocation, just part of the job. They say soot causes something called soot wart, a form of cancer that affects the skin. But no one talks about it. Not when the choice is between crawling up a chimney or starving. You give him a piece of crust from your pie. He accepts it silently and disappears into a stairwell. You keep moving. As night falls, you begin to notice the gaslights flickering on, soft orange halos in the gloom. They don't do much against the fog, but they give the streets a strange beauty, a kind of haunted glow. You pause near one and watch a lamplighter work. He uses a long pole with a tiny flame at the end, lighting each lamp with the precision of someone who's done this dance 1,000 times. There's something peaceful about it, repetitive, purposeful. You wonder if he likes the job or just endures it. Lamplighters are a dying breed, you've heard. Electricity is on the rise. But not here. Not yet. You pass by a group of kids playing with hoops and sticks, their laughter echoing off brick walls. A game of marbles unfolds nearby. One boy cheats, obviously. Another calls him out, just as obviously. A scuffle starts, but it's half-hearted. Too tired to fight properly. You catch a whiff of perfume as a woman brushes past you. Too fine. For this part of town. Her dress is clean, her gloves spotless. A respectable lady. She looks past you like you're part of the scenery. You don't blame her. You probably are. Your feet ache. Your shoulders throb. But you make one last stop before heading home. A penny reading room, tucked inside an old church annex. You pay. Your penny. Duck inside and take a seat at the communal table. The paper is 2 days old, but you read it anyway. News of Parliament debates, scandals involving people whose names sound like dessert items, and a story about a man who claims to have invented a machine that can fly. Historians still argue whether he actually launched anything or just threw a chair off a roof and called it a prototype. You don't stay long, just enough to enjoy the quiet and the smell of old paper. Outside again, the night has thickened. You pull your coat tighter, fingers half frozen, and retrace your steps back home. Same creaking stairwell, same broken step, the same crooked room that somehow feels warmer tonight. You collapse onto the mattress, sharing space with snoring, muttering, and the occasional elbow jab. And despite everything, the grime, the cold, the unknown meat, there's a strange sense of comfort in it all. You made it through another day in Victorian London. Morning again. You don't remember falling asleep, but here you are, blinking, at the cracked ceiling and listening to the soft symphony of a tenement waking up. Coughs, clatters, murmurs, and someone yelling at a chicken. You're not entirely sure where the chicken came from. Then again, that's Victorian London for you. Unscheduled poultry appearances are just part of the ambience. You roll out of bed, stretching muscles that feel as stiff as frozen rope, and pull your coat over your sleep clothes. It's cold. Not just cold, damp and bone deep, like the walls themselves are exhaling misery. You shuffle across the room and open the shutter. Outside, the street is already alive with people, and this morning, you're not headed to a factory or work site. You're navigating the mysterious world of the Victorian street trade. Street life isn't just a backdrop in London, it's the city's pulsing heart. You step into the flow, and immediately the chorus begins. Hot chestnuts, calls a man with a small brazier cart. Mackerel, fresh from the docks, yells another, holding up a fish that looks questionable. The cries of street hawkers blend together into a rhythm, London's own tired, hungry music. You pass a muffin man, bells tinkling as he walks, balancing a tray of round, soot-kissed muffins on his head. This isn't the nursery rhyme version. This muffin man has cracked boots, half a finger missing, and the tired eyes of someone who's walked 10 miles before dawn. Still, he nods at you. Professional courtesy, perhaps. You pause at a store with ribbons and trinkets, run by an older woman with a shawl that smells faintly of mint and mothballs. She sees you looking and offers you a crooked smile. "One halfpenny today, love," she says, holding up a limp bit of lace. You shake your head and move on. She shrugs. "There'll be another like you in 5 minutes. Street sellers like her, flower girls, rag dealers, candy vendors, form their own tangled economy. It's a balancing act. Shout loud enough to be heard, but not so loud that you're chased off by police. Sell just enough to eat, but not enough to threaten the shopkeepers with real stores and stiff collars. Children dart through the crowd with baskets of matches or stacks of cheap newspapers. The newsboys yell headlines with an urgency that makes every event sound like a royal scandal. Queen seen smiling. Twice. Rain expected again. Surprise. Some kids sell watercress. Cheap, edible, vaguely nutritious. Some push pins and needles on strips of cloth. It's a living, barely. Many of them are orphans or near enough. Historians still argue whether the explosion in child labour was purely economic necessity or the result of a society that simply didn't know what else to do with them. You watch a young girl offer violets to a passing gentleman. He waves her, off like she's a fly. She doesn't even blink, just moves on to the next potential customer. That sort of resilience doesn't come from optimism. It's survival muscle, the kind you build when you're paid in shrugs and rain. Of course, not all street trades are legal. Just around the corner, you spot a familiar figure, the card man. He lays out 3 cups and a pea, moving with practiced grace. "Which one, Gov? A penny says you can't catch me." The game is rigged always, but people still fall for it. Nearby, his partner pretends to win big, planting the illusion of luck. Farther down, the smoke from a pipe seller curls into the fog. He's got cheap clay pipes, pre-packed with dubious tobacco. You wonder how many of his customers smoke for pleasure versus how many do it to quiet their hunger. You nod at him as you pass. He nods back, exhaling a puff shaped vaguely like Queen Victoria, if you squint and believe in miracles. You catch a glimpse of another category of trader, the street performer. A boy with a violin plays a mournful tune that belongs more to a funeral than a street corner. A little farther, a man with a trained monkey collects coins in a hat. The monkey salutes you with eerie precision. You salute back, because why not? The man grins. He likes you, he says, like that's a thing that should reassure you. Street performance is a gamble. Rain ruins your act. Police ruin your earnings. Drunks ruin everything else. But on a lucky day, a few pennies fall into your cap, and you eat something that didn't come from a suspicious barrel. Speaking of which, your stomach growls. Loudly. You follow the scent of something frying and find a woman selling fried potatoes. You hand over your last coin and get a folded cone of newspaper filled with salty, greasy chunks. It burns your fingers, and you couldn't care less. It's heaven. As you eat, you watch a dustman go by, pushing a massive handcart filled with ash and cinders. He's part of the night soil system, the network of people who keep the city from being buried under its own waste. Barely. These men empty chamber pots and scrape cesspits, then sell the waste to farmers outside the city. It's grim, dangerous work, falls, gas build-up, disease, none of it glamorous, but the pay's just enough to justify the risk, sometimes. Historians still argue whether the night soil industry slowed or sped the march toward real sanitation reform. You spot another trader, the rag and bone man. He carries a sack and a stick with a nail at the end, poking through piles of refuse for anything salvageable. Rags become paper, bones become glue, and even bits of metal can be melted and reused. It's recycling, Victorian style, equal parts thrift and desperation. Back on the main thoroughfare, you nearly bump into a man selling miracle elixirs from a painted cart. He wears a top hat that's seen better centuries and gestures grandly as he describes his herbal tonic, guaranteed to cure everything from baldness to broken hearts. You watch for a while as he gives a theatrical demo, then slips a bottle to a curious onlooker. It smells like turpentine and licorice. You don't buy it. but you do admire the hustle. The street begins to clear slightly as evening rolls in. The traders pack up their goods, what little is left, and prepare for another cycle of the same. Some made enough to eat, some didn't. A few managed to squirrel away an extra penny or two. You think about joining them tomorrow, maybe selling ribbons or hot-roasted chestnuts, or poems about sewer rats. The possibilities are endless, if not exactly lucrative. Back in your tenement, someone plays a fiddle badly in the hallway. Someone else snores like a dying horse. You lie on your mattress, hands smelling faintly of potatoes and soot, and think about the street. No glamorous drawing rooms or fine silverware here, just grit, shouts, and the hum of hundreds trying to stay afloat. Somehow, it's beautiful. The fire in the hearth is down to a faint orange glow, casting long, twitching shadows on the cracked plaster walls. You stir beneath your thin blanket, aware of the early morning bustle downstairs. Doors creaking, pails clanking, someone muttering. About rats again. Your body aches in all the familiar ways, and your stomach issues its daily reminder that it exists and is extremely unimpressed with your dietary choices. Today, you're on a mission that few ever relish, navigating the perilous, chaotic world of public transportation in Victorian London. And yes, that means brushing shoulders, and occasionally knees, with your fellow city dwellers in a tightly packed, often pungent box on wheels or rails. But hey, beats walking, probably. You grab your coat, still damp from yesterday's fog, and head out into the street, the stones slick underfoot. The first vehicle you pass is a horse-drawn omnibus, a large, lumbering beast of a coach with benches inside and, if you're unlucky, a few rough spots where the wood's worn through. You raise a hand and the driver, a man in a weather-beaten coat and permanently angry eyebrows, slows just enough for you to hop on. Inside, it's cozy in the way a cupboard is cozy. 14 people crammed shoulder to shoulder, with knees overlapping and parcels balanced precariously on laps. The windows are fogged from breath and grime, and the smell is a distinct cocktail of wet wool, boot leather, pipe smoke, and something unidentifiably fishy. You're not asking. A woman near you clutches a basket of hens. One pecks at your sleeve. You pretend not to notice. Victorian London's omnibuses are the first major attempt at urban mass transit, running regular routes along major thoroughfares. Of course, regular is relative. You lurch forward as the driver clicks his tongue and whips the reins. The horses surge into motion, hooves clattering on the cobblestones. The bench under you creaks ominously, but holds, for now. As you bump along, you try to read the painted signs on passing storefronts. A grocer, a chemist, a bakery with bread so fresh you can smell it from the street. Which is unusual, because bread here tends to be a bit rock-like. London bread is often whitened with alum and chalk. Nice and decorative for your insides. Historians still argue whether bakers really believed it was harmless or just didn't care so long as it made the loaves look pure. The omnibus halts abruptly, and you nearly headbutt a banker's hat. A few passengers disembark, and a small boy scrambles on, clutching, a stack of newspapers under one arm and a ragged cap in the other. He grins up at you, gap-toothed and cheerful, then promptly sneezes on your sleeve. You shift toward the window and let your eyes wander. A new transport rumbles past, a horse-drawn tram. These are a bit smoother than omnibuses, thanks to iron. Tracks laid in the road. You make a mental note to try one someday, maybe when your ribs feel less jostled. Soon you reach your stop, a crowded junction where nearly every form of Victorian locomotion can be spotted. You clamber down with the grace of a sleep-deprived turtle and land in the middle of organised mayhem. Cabs, carts, and barrows all fight for space, and you have to dodge a wheelbarrow full of cabbages before crossing the road. And then you see it, a strange, new marvel. The Underground Railway. London's Metropolitan Railway opened in 1863, and, though it's been nicknamed the Drain, it's a bold experiment in subterranean travel. You descend a flight of stone steps into the world's first subway. It smells like warm iron and damp wool. Everything smells like damp wool here. The platform is dimly lit, the walls stained with soot. The train arrives with a rattling clatter and a puff of steam. It's powered by a steam locomotive. Yes, underground. No, that doesn't make much sense. Ventilation is a concept still under development. You step into a wooden carriage that looks more like a stagecoach than a train car. It's surprisingly elegant inside, if you ignore the fact that you're inhaling several generations' worth of coal dust. The doors slam shut, and the train jolts forward. The light dims as you plunge into the tunnel. You grip the side of the bench and hope that this very experimental form of travel continues functioning for at least another 10 minutes. Despite the smell and the noise, there's something thrilling about it. This idea of moving under the city, unseen. The passengers sit stiffly, as though afraid they might rattle apart like the train itself. A clergyman across from you coughs delicately into a handkerchief. You cough back. Politeness is key. Above ground, cabs still rule the streets. The hansom cab, in particular, is all the rage. It's a two-wheeled vehicle drawn by a single horse with room for 2 passengers and a high-up driver who watches over you like an unusually judgmental guardian angel. They're faster and more maneuverable than the larger 4-wheeled growler cabs, which are often used to haul luggage, or very wealthy people with very large hats. You eventually surface from the underworld, a little sooty and slightly deafened. You spot a cab stand nearby. You don't have the fare, but you hang around anyway, just watching. The drivers shout to one another, occasionally hopping down to inspect the hooves of their horses or argue with potential clients. One boasts about how his mare can outrun the devil's own wind. You try not to picture what that would smell like. Just beyond, a man attempts to ride a penny-farthing bicycle down the street. It's equal parts majestic and ridiculous. The enormous front wheel wobbling perilously, the rider's face set in fierce concentration. He's wearing goggles. You admire his optimism. He promptly hits a pothole and topples into a fruit cart. Oranges scatter like tiny sunbursts. You take a moment to reflect. Victorian London is moving, sometimes forward, sometimes sideways, often with great noise and inconvenience. But the city is obsessed with speed and progress, and transportation is at its heart. They're building, experimenting, failing, and trying again. Historians still argue whether the rapid expansion of public transport unified the city or simply made its divisions more visible. Because yes, you can now travel across London faster than ever, but the fare is still higher than some can afford, and the routes, built through the neighbourhoods of the poor, not for them. You find yourself on foot again, weaving through the horse-drawn chaos. You nearly get clipped by a delivery wagon and mutter a polite Victorian expletive under your breath. Something mild, like dash it all, or confound this infernal cart. It doesn't help. You still step in something you really hope is just mud. As you make your way home, you wonder what transportation will look like in 100 years. Machines that fly, roads without horses, maybe even moving staircases. Probably not the clean sort. For now, though, you're just glad your legs still work. Sort of. You're not entirely sure what wakes you. The dripping of water from a cracked ceiling, the shouting match 2 floors down, or perhaps the rat that just decided your blanket was also its blanket. Either way, it's morning again in Victorian London, and you're due for your next lesson in survival. The art of staying healthy in a city that really doesn't want you to. You sit up slowly, careful not to hit your head on the low beam overhead. Your chest feels tight, and there's a persistent tickle in your throat. Welcome to the London cough, basically a rite of passage. There's soot in the air, coal dust in your lungs, and probably something dubious floating in your tea water. You'll fit right in. The city smells faintly of sulphur, wet stone, and a lingering layer of manure. The Thames, ever loyal in its aroma, carries on belching up whatever secrets have been tossed into it during the night. They say the river's getting better. They also say cough syrup works, and you've tasted that, so you're skeptical. On your way down the stairs, you pass a neighbour leaning against the wall, wheezing softly. He raises a finger in greeting, then coughs for a solid 20 seconds. Better today, he croaks. You nod, mostly out of hope. Let's talk medical care. or what counts as such. You're not likely to find a kindly white-coated doctor making house calls with a stethoscope and good bedside manner. Instead, you're more apt to deal with a chemist, a gentleman in an apron, who sells mysterious powders and elixirs, many of which contain things you'd now consider recreational drugs. Laudanum is the Victorian go-to, an opium-based solution advertised for everything from menstrual cramps to overexcited children. Not a joke. A teaspoon of that, and you'll be calm, quiet, and gently unconscious. You stop by one of these chemist shops, mostly for curiosity's sake. The window display boasts jars of coloured powders, a few jars with pickled things, and a handwritten sign advertising tooth powder, now with real charcoal. Inside, the air smells like camphor and old bandages. You eye a bottle labelled brain tonic and back away slowly. Street remedies are everywhere. You hear whispers about goose grease poultices, coal tar soap, and the timeless favourite, vinegar. Got a fever? Vinegar. Gout? Vinegar. Hair loss? Vinegar. Will it work? Not likely. But it'll sting so much you'll forget why you needed it in the first place. Outside, a woman with a cart is selling leeches. For blood balance, she says, waving one in your direction like it's a party favour. You decline, politely, barely. Public hospitals exist, but unless you're desperate or dying, you try to avoid them. They're often overcrowded, underfunded, and a little too fond of sawing things off. Anesthesia exists now, thank goodness. But the line between brave medical innovation and reckless guesswork is thin. Historians still argue whether the introduction of chloroform in surgery helped revolutionize care or simply made high-risk procedures more frequent and more dangerous in the short term. Back in your tenement, you hear a scream from next door. It's followed by a groan and some rustling. You consider going to check, but that's how you get volunteered to carry someone's unconscious uncle to the dispensary. Again. Children play in the alleyway, barefoot and coughing. One of them stops mid-game to vomit neatly into a drain and then resumes his game of stick and hoop like it's just another Tuesday. Kids are resilient like that. Also, probably full of laudanum. You glance down the alley and spot one of the many water pumps scattered around the city. You pause. Is it a safe one? Depends. After the cholera outbreak, people are at least vaguely aware that water might have something to do with disease. Dr. John Snow, not the one from the north, but the father of modern epidemiology, famously removed the handle from the Broad Street pump to stop the spread of cholera. It worked. But not everyone bought into the germ theory idea at the time. Miasma, or bad air, is still the leading explanation for most diseases. You give the pump a cautious side eye and move on. Bathing is another matter entirely. A full hot bath is a luxury for the rich. For you, it's a tin basin and some boiled water, if you can find firewood. Most just stick to sponge baths, a good scrub with carbolic soap if you can afford it, and a heavy dose of deodorizing perfume. The kind that smells like crushed flowers and poor decisions. You stop in front of a small storefront, a barber surgeon. Yes, both. They'll trim your beard and pull your tooth in the same visit. It's cost-effective, if not comforting. You watch as a man exits, pressing a rag to his jaw, smiling grimly, as though proud of his newly acquired mouth gap. Inside your building, someone mentions that a fever house is opening nearby. That's code for a temporary isolation ward. Diseases like typhus, diphtheria, and scarlet fever sweep through tenements like wildfire. If someone in your building catches one, your odds of escaping it are slim. Most people simply treat it at home, with rest. And vinegar. Women, particularly poor women, often serve as caretakers for the sick, whether they want to or not. Sometimes it's a family member. Other times it's just that you're the only one not coughing blood yet. Nurses are becoming more professional thanks to folks like Florence Nightingale, but many still lack training, and the boundary between help and harm can get murky. You spend a few moments tending to a neighbour's child who's come down with something that involves a lot of sneezing, sweating, and a concerning rash. You sponge his forehead and offer a sip of boiled water. It's not much, but it's human. which is more than you can say for half the official care options. You're reminded of a local midwife. She's rumored to know what herbs can help reduce fever, what compressors soothe cramps, and which roots ward off the shaking fits. People trust her more than the clinics. She charges little or nothing, and the line at her door is always long. Some call her a saint, others whisper witch under their breath. Historians still argue whether such women helped preserve folk medicine or merely delayed modern practice. By nightfall, you're exhausted from doing what passes for basic care. Your hands are dry from soap, your knees ache from crouching, and your throat burns in a way that feels ominous. But you're alive. And for now, mostly upright. You settle, back onto your cot, clutching a tin cup of weak tea laced with whatever syrup the chemist swore would help you breathe easier. It tastes like licorice and regret. A lull of quiet settles over the tenement. Someone is humming softly in the room next door. You breathe in, shallow and careful, and exhale into the dimness. This city wants to break you, but not tonight. Sleep does not come easily when you're sharing a wall with a man who snores like a broken accordion, and a ceiling with neighbors who apparently enjoy dragging furniture around at a.m. Still, you manage a few hours before the light starts to creep in through the cracks in the window, just enough to illuminate the fine layer of soot collecting on your blanket. A gentle reminder you're breathing that in. Today, you're off to work, or to try at least. Employment in Victorian London is less about finding a career and more about surviving the day without being replaced, injured, or forgotten entirely. So you pull on your one halfway clean shirt, brush the dust off your boots, and trudge into the maze of narrow, smoke-stained streets. You pass people already hard at work. A chimney sweep brushes past, face black with soot, tools clinking at his side. He can't be more than 10 years old. Children are everywhere in the workforce, small enough to squeeze into chimneys, fast enough to dart between carts, cheap enough that employers don't ask questions. You nod at him. He coughs in reply. That's London for hello. If you're a man, options vary wildly depending on class. If you're working class, and you are, your choices lean toward physical labor, dock work, street sweeping, coal hauling, maybe a factory if you're lucky, and the machines haven't claimed too many fingers this week. You check your hands. All fingers accounted for. Good start. You head toward a match factory, not to work, but to ask around. The women who work there are mostly young, and they're called match girls. Their job involves dipping wooden sticks into phosphorus paste. No gloves, no ventilation, just endless exposure to toxic chemicals. The result? A horrifying condition called phossy-jaw, where the jawbone essentially begins to rot away. Your stomach turns just thinking about it. Historians still argue whether factory owners truly understood the risks or chose to ignore them because, well, profit. You linger by the gates and chat with a girl on break. Her face is pale, her fingers stained. She shrugs when you ask about the danger. Better than starving, she says. Back on the main road, carts rumble past carrying bundles of rags. Rag pickers make their living scavenging usable scraps from the city's refuse. Old cloth, bones, metal bits. It's dirty work, but at least it's flexible. You spot one older man pulling a makeshift sled piled high with debris. His dog trots beside him, loyal and likely more hygienic than most people you've met today. And then there are mudlarks, those who scavenge the banks of the Thames at low tide, looking for lost coins, dropped buttons, maybe even the odd bit of jewelry. You've tried it once, ended up with wet socks and a suspicious rash. Never again. You pass a group of navvies, short for navigators, men who build canals, railways and other grand projects. They're tough, rowdy, and usually covered in more dirt than clothing. One tips his cap to you, revealing a black eye and half a grin. Job's yours if you can lift a wheelbarrow without weeping, he offers. You politely decline. If you're a woman, employment is somehow even more limited. Domestic service is the most common path. Maids, cooks, laundresses, long hours, low pay, and constant scrutiny. Your neighbour Sarah works for a family in Kensington, and returns once a month with red hands and a spine permanently bent at 45 degrees. "They like their silver polished," she whispers, eyes unfocused. Some women take in sewing or laundry from home. You pass a small flat where steam pours from a cracked window. Inside, a mother and daughter press shirts with flat, irons heated over coal. The room smells like soap and sweat. They wave you off gently, too busy to chat. Prostitution, while technically illegal, thrives in the shadows and alleyways. You don't look too closely, but you see them. The women with tired eyes and too bright dresses, leaning in doorways or sitting quietly on stoops. It's dangerous work, and the risk of violence or disease is constant. But for many, it's the only work available. Historians still argue whether the so-called rescue homes did more to help or shame the women they aim to reform. You make your way toward a construction site where a new row of houses is being thrown up. Luxury homes, the kind with brass door knockers and enough gas lighting to blind a stable boy. A foreman eyes you and jerks his head. Need someone to move bricks. You nod and get to work. The hours pass in a rhythm of lift, carry, stack, repeat. Your shoulders burn, your palms blister. Someone nearby whistles off key. Another man tells the same joke 4 times. You laugh each time. Better that than scowling and getting elbowed into a wall. There's a break at midday, barely long enough to chew on a hunk of bread and sip lukewarm tea from a shared tin mug. You sit in the shade, legs trembling slightly. Someone offers you a bit of cheese. It smells suspicious, but you accept it gratefully. Calories are calories. You think about unions. They're growing in power, slowly. Workers are beginning to demand better conditions, fairer pay. There are strikes now and then, dangerous, brave actions. But just mentioning the word union too loudly can get you fired. Or worse. You keep your voice down. As the day ends, the foreman gives you a coin and a grunt. Your fingers are numb. Your back feels like a bookshelf someone sat on. But you earned something. Just enough for bread. Maybe coal. Definitely not rent. That's another problem for another day. You trudge home past open shop fronts and half-closed pubs. A boy offers to shine your boots. You look down. It'd be like polishing a wet potato. You decline. A man shouts, the evening paper headlines. Scandal at Parliament. More gas mains explode. Same as yesterday. You give him a nod. He gives you a wink. You don't ask. Back at your building, someone is singing a lullaby off-key. A baby cries. A cat yowls. You climb the stairs one step at a time, each joint creaking like floorboards in an old theatre. Inside your room, you collapse onto the mattress. You're too tired to eat, too tired to cough, too tired even to notice the rat staring at you from the rafters. You close your eyes and exhale. Today, you worked. Not enough to get ahead, but enough to stay even. In Victorian London, that's a miracle. By the time your eyes open again, the sun is peeking over the rooftops, casting a pale golden light. Through your smudged window pane, your body aches like it's been traded in for a bag of rocks, but you're up. You're always up. In Victorian London, there's no such thing as sleeping in, only falling behind. Today, you're on a mission, food. Not just scavenged crusts or watery cabbage stew, real food, or at least the closest thing to it that you can afford. You lace your boots. One lace is really a bit of string now, and head out into the bustling rhythm of morning commerce. The city smells more pungent at this hour. Fish, manure, coal smoke, stale beer, and something faintly sweet and suspiciously rotting all dance together in your nostrils. You pass a man selling hot eels from a cart. "Piping hot, 3 a penny," he bellows, shaking a tin of steaming, slippery things that gleam in the sunlight like damp shoelaces. Victorians do love their eels. In fact, jellied eels are a delicacy of sorts, especially in East London. Chopped, boiled, and then suspended in their own cooled jelly. You try not to gag just thinking about the texture, but they're cheap, they're protein, and in this town, that counts for a lot. You swing by the nearest market, a chaotic maze of crates, shouting vendors, wheelbarrows, and a goat someone has inexplicably tied to a lamppost. The goat bleats like it's auditioning for a tragedy. You nod in understanding. The market has everything: turnips, potatoes, bruised apples, dry looking, bread and meat that is, well, let's say untrustworthy. Flies hover over the butcher's slab, and a woman loudly haggles over a chicken that may or may not be alive. It's unclear who's winning. You pick up a small loaf and a questionable wedge of cheese. The vendor squints at your coin like it's counterfeit, then shrugs and hands over the goods. You'll have to ration this for the next few days, which means tonight's dinner might just be bread dipped in weak tea. Again, tea, of course, is sacred, not because it tastes amazing, though sometimes it does, but because it's boiled. In a city where water can literally kill you, boiling anything is a small, life-preserving miracle. You pass a tea seller on the corner, doling out hot cups to factory girls and errand boys. It's milky, barely tea-coloured, and sweetened with something not entirely unlike sugar. Still, you clutch yours like treasure. You sit on a crate near the river to sip your drink and nibble your bread. A barge creaks by, heavy with coal. Seagulls wheel overhead, shrieking like drunk toddlers. Somewhere downriver, someone is singing. Off-key, but with feeling. Food in Victorian London is a study in class division. The rich dine on roast goose, oysters and custards, while you consider yourself lucky to find a carrot that isn't already half compost. Charles Dickens once described a lavish banquet with dishes. You once ate a meal with 3: bread, onion, and hope. Still, the city adapts. Cheap cafes and coffee stalls sprout near factories. Soup kitchens appear, especially in colder months, offering thin stew and charity with a side of judgment. You once visited one run by a religious society. They handed out bread rolls and Bible verses in equal measure. You weren't sure which stuck longer. One of the market vendors calls out to you, a woman selling penny pies. You've had them before. Flaky, hot, delicious, until you remember the meat could be anything from pork to pigeon to yesterday's regrets. Still, it's food. You buy one, blow on it carefully, and take a bite. It's salty, peppery, oddly chewy. You decide not to ask questions. You wander towards Spitalfields, where you've heard a few street stalls sell exotic treats brought in from other corners of the empire. Dates, curry powders, even strange sweets wrapped in paper. London is the belly of an empire now, and its appetite stretches across oceans. One stall offers curry over rice for a few pennies. It smells rich and strange and wonderful. You savour a spoonful and blink at the heat. It's like eating fire and flowers at once. The vendor grins. "Imported from Bombay," he says. You nod. "My compliments to Bombay." Historians still argue whether the influence of colonial cuisine in London's working-class neighbourhoods came through genuine cultural exchange or the need to sell anything remotely edible. Either way, you're not complaining. By midday, food stalls thin and pubs begin to fill. The local gin palace glows invitingly, its gaslights glittering even in daylight. You avoid it. Gin is cheap. Too cheap. Known as Mother's Ruin, it's addictive and devastating. You've seen neighbours disappear into its haze, emerging days later, or never. There's a man who hasn't spoken a full sentence since the Queen's coronation, and the gin might be to blame. Still, alcohol is part of daily life. Beer is safer than water. Ale is sold by the jugful, and children often drink it, watered down with supper. Not for fun, just because it won't give them cholera. You think about meat again. Fresh meat. The kind that's not grey or buzzing. Most of the time, the poor buy what's called offal. Liver, kidneys, lungs, trotters. You once had a sheep's head stew. The eyeballs stared at you the whole time. You ate it anyway. Protein is protein. You recall a quirk of the era, the fried fish warehouse. Not quite a restaurant, not quite a stall. It's an early precursor to the chip shop. Fried fish, usually cod or haddock, wrapped in paper and served hot, cheap, satisfying and mercifully free of bone shards. You make a mental note to visit one next payday, assuming you still have fingers to count with. As you wander back home, you pass the remains of a street banquet thrown by some well-meaning society to treat the poor. The tables are empty, now littered with crusts and wrappers. A child clutches a bit of cake like it's gold. You smile at him. He scowls back. Fair enough. Back in your room, you carefully slice the remaining cheese and bread into tomorrow's portions. You boil water for tea, twice, just to be sure, and dip the last hunk of bread. It's soft, it's warm, it tastes like survival. Outside, the wind howls down the alley, rattling windows and puffing coal dust through every crack. But inside, for now, your stomach isn't empty. You have tea, you have toes. Things could be worse, and they probably will be tomorrow. The evenings in Victorian London are a patchwork of light and shadow, smell and sound, and the ever-present hum of a city that never quite sleeps. You trudge back from your day's labour, feet dragging through mud and discarded bits of refuse that crunch underfoot like the brittle memories of a better life. The sun is slipping below the horizon, but the city's energy pulses on, flickering gas lamps casting warm halos that barely cut through the lingering fog. Dinner is meagre, stale bread, a bit of cheese if you're lucky, and the remnants of that mystery pie from earlier. You nibble quietly, mindful of the rat scurrying near the hearth, its eyes glinting in the flickering firelight. You've named it Mr. Whiskers in your head, which is probably an optimistic stretch. Still, company's company. Night brings its own hazards. Gaslighting, still a relatively new invention, fills the streets with a flickering, slightly toxic glow. You pull your coat tighter as the cold seeps in from the damp stones beneath your feet. The fog thickens, swallowing the street lamps and muffling voices into ghostly whispers. Perfect conditions for pickpockets, cut purses, and the less savoury characters who prowl for trouble. You're mindful of where you walk. Alleys and side streets are best avoided after dark, yet you sometimes find yourself passing through them, especially when heading home late from work or after a visit to the pub. You remember the infamous pea soup fog that sometimes rolls in, so dense it swallows entire carriages, smells of sulphur, and leaves a metallic taste on your tongue. It's a fog that doesn't just obscure your vision, but your breath as well. Historians still argue whether this phenomenon was purely natural or exacerbated by the relentless burning of coal. Street lighting is a luxury, not a guarantee. Many districts remain cloaked in darkness, their shadows hiding more than just the occasional stray dog. You hear whispers of night walkers, those who take to the streets after dusk, either out of desperation or for darker purposes. Tales of the Ripper had begun to circulate, even if you don't dare utter his name aloud. The air feels heavier with fear, each footstep echoing with uncertainty. Public lavatories are rare, and chamber pots are the norm, emptied directly onto the streets below windows. You remind yourself not to walk too close to the walls. A sudden splash is more than embarrassing. It's a reminder of the city's indifference to its poor. One bright spot. Night soil men arrive in the wee hours, carting away waste, their lanterns bobbing like fireflies. You pause at a corner to watch a group of boys playing marbles under a gaslight. Their laughter rings out, sharp and joyful, despite the grime caked beneath their nails. Childhood here is a mixed bag, short, rough, and filled with more danger than play. Child labour, poverty, disease, they all conspire against innocence. You catch sight of a woman in a threadbare shawl, clutching a bundle close to her chest. She looks tired beyond words. You wonder what dreams she might have tonight, if any. The city swallows hope whole, but sometimes, somehow, it lets a few stray sparks flicker. Returning to your room, you check the lock on your door, a flimsy piece of wood and metal that offers little protection, but a small comfort nonetheless. You sit by the window, watching the fog swirl like restless spirits. The sounds of the city, distant church bells, clattering carts, a dog barking, fade into a lullaby of urban life. You think back to your day, the work, the food, the small kindnesses and harsh realities. It's a rhythm repeated by thousands, perhaps millions across London. The struggle to endure, to find small moments of peace in a city both unforgiving and alive. You lie down on your lumpy mattress, pulling a threadbare blanket up to your chin. The gaslight dims as the city's lamps flicker off one by one, surrendering to the dawn that waits patiently in the wings. Tonight, you survive. Tomorrow, you try again. The next morning arrives, grey and heavy with the promise of rain, the kind of drizzle that seeps into your bones and makes the cobblestones slippery enough to fall on. But you don't have time for that. London waits for no one, especially not someone like you. You pull your coat tight and step out into the maze again, the air thick with the mingled scents of soot, horse sweat, and something you can't quite place, old paper maybe, or the faintest trace of lavender from a passing carriage. Today you head toward the infamous workhouses. These towering institutions are as much prisons as they are shelters. Designed to house the destitute, they offer food and a roof, but at a price. The conditions are harsh, the rules strict, and the stigma even harsher. You've heard stories from those unlucky enough to be locked behind their walls. Long hours of pointless labor, barely edible gruel, and guards who treat inmates like criminals. Some say the workhouses are designed to be so awful that only the truly desperate enter. Walking past one, you see lines of men and women waiting to be admitted, their faces gaunt and weary. Children cling to mothers' skirts, eyes wide with fear or resignation. You wonder how many will last a week, a month, or the winter. Historians still argue whether workhouses served as a necessary social safety net or a punitive institution that deepened poverty and despair. You avoid the front gate, but stop to watch the daily routine. Men are marched out early, sent to break stones, pick oakum, a tedious task of unraveling old ropes, or shuffle along factory lines. Women wash endless piles of laundry, sew garments under flickering gaslights, or scrub floors until their fingers bleed. The hours are long, the pay non-existent. Nearby, you spot a soup kitchen. A few dozen people huddle around a steaming cauldron, receiving thin broth ladled into tin bowls. You remember the hunger that gnaws at your own belly and debate joining the queue. Pride wins out today. Further along, a preacher stands on a soapbox, reading from a tattered Bible, voice booming over the chatter and clatter. He speaks of salvation, redemption, and the promise of a better life beyond the muck. You can't help but notice how many heads are bowed, whether in prayer or exhaustion. The workhouse system is intertwined with Victorian attitudes toward poverty, ideas that the poor must be reformed through discipline and hard labour. You've overheard whispered debates in pubs and factories. Is poverty a result of moral failure or the cruel hand of circumstance? Historians still argue whether these institutions ultimately helped or harmed those they were meant to support. As you wander back into the city's bustling streets, you pass a group of boys selling newspapers, penny dreadfuls, filled with sensational stories and illustrations that captivate the public imagination. They shout headlines about crime, scandal, and tragedy, their voices sharp and persistent. You buy one, eager for a distraction from the bleakness. Inside you find tales of hauntings, crime bosses, and mysterious disappearances. The city's darker side is laid bare, feeding both fear and fascination. The truth often blurs with rumour, and it's hard to tell which is more dangerous. You tuck the paper into your coat and continue home, weaving through crowds of shoppers, street performers, and hawkers. You stop briefly at a small bookstall where an elderly man sells pamphlets on hygiene and manners, one of many early attempts to educate the public about cleanliness and health. You pick one up. It suggests boiling water before drinking and washing hands regularly, revolutionary advice for many. You think about the city's water supply, tangled, contaminated, and often deadly. Cholera outbreaks sweep through neighbourhoods, killing thousands in their wake. You remember that famous night when Dr. John Snow traced a cholera outbreak to a single contaminated water pump on Broad Street. A breakthrough still debated by medical historians. That night, you sip your tea with more care than usual, thinking of all the invisible dangers lurking in the everyday. In Victorian London, knowledge is power, and ignorance can be fatal. The city doesn't sleep, and neither do your thoughts. Even as you drift into dreams, the din of London thrums on, a lullaby of creaking carts, hissing gas lamps, and distant arguments that never quite reach resolution. But today, you're up early again, and you're headed toward the world of medical care, or something faintly resembling it. You pass by a chemist's shop first. In the window, bottles in rich hues of cobalt and amber gleam like trapped lightning, bugs, each promising to cure what ails you, or at least distract you from it. Inside, shelves are packed with tonics, lozenges, elixirs, and powders with names that sound either reassuring or vaguely threatening. Soothing syrup, chlorodyne, and Dr. Bulstrode's Linctus for ague and vapors. You've tried a few. One gave you a stomachache. Another gave you vivid dreams of flying horses and talking walls. That one, you later learned, was laced with opium. Quite common, actually. The line between medication and narcotic is blurry in Victorian London. Babies are even fed opium syrup to keep them quiet. Historians still argue whether Victorian reliance on patent medicines did more harm than good. But judging from your last experience, you're leaning toward harmful hallucinations. When sickness strikes, and it strikes often, you have a few options. None of them great. If you're poor, your best bet might be the local apothecary or a charitable dispensary. Doctors cost money, and hospitals are a last resort. You once visited a hospital when a friend broke his arm on the job. The waiting room was crowded, air thick with sweat, despair, and something faintly antiseptic. You remember the rows of iron beds, sheets stiff with starch, the clatter of a tray being dropped 2 wards over. The nurses moved briskly, their skirts brushing against the floor like whispers. One of them, matron something or other, had the sharp efficiency of a sergeant and the bedside manner of a tax collector. Hospitals in London, especially those for the poor, are more survivalist boot camps than centres of healing. St. Bartholomew's and Guy's are the big names, but their resources are stretched thin, and cleanliness is more of an aspiration than a guarantee. You still remember the smell of the operating theatre, a mingling of sweat, carbolic acid, and fear. And surgery, let's just say it's not for the faint-hearted, or the conscious. Anesthesia is a relatively new thing, and many operations are done without it. If you're lucky, they use chloroform. If you're unlucky, it's a leather strap between the teeth and a prayer to the ceiling. One popular quirk, public surgeries. Yes, actual crowds once gathered in viewing galleries to watch surgeons perform amputations, tumour removals, or trephinations, like a brutal, morbid theatre. Surgeons were judged not only on success, but speed. A famous record, an amputation in under seconds. Unfortunately, he also amputated 2 fingers from his assistant and slashed the coat of a bystander, who died of fright. Efficiency. If you manage to survive illness, infection becomes your next adversary. Germ theory is still controversial. Many doctors don't even wash their hands between patients. It's not until later in the century, thanks to pioneers like Joseph Lister, that antiseptic practices start gaining ground. You've overheard arguments. Some doctors believe cleanliness is unnecessary. Others claim the invisible world of microbes is the real battlefield. Historians still debate how quickly Lister's methods were adopted across the country. For now, you stick to your own remedies. You boil your water, rub camphor on your chest when your lungs protest, and drink a foul herbal brew passed down from your grandmother. It tastes like something you'd scrape off a barroom floor, but it helps. Probably. Dentistry. Don't even. Think about it. Toothaches are handled with clove oil, brandy, or, when things get bad, a trip to the barber surgeon, who'll yank the offending molar with a pair of iron forceps and no remorse. Anesthetics. Optional. You've heard stories of people tying themselves to chairs with rope, hoping not to bite off their own tongue in the process. Mental health, of course, is a whole separate nightmare. Melancholy, hysteria, nervous disorders. They're all tossed into a bubbling stew of misunderstanding and judgment. Institutions like Bedlam still echo with the screams of the misunderstood. Treatments range from rest and gentle therapy to ice baths, spinning chairs, and, on occasion, a sharp smack across the face. Compassion, it seems, isn't always part of the protocol. You pass a man on the street today, muttering to himself, eyes darting at things no one else can see. People avoid him, A few children throw stones. No one helps. The city has little patience for the mad, or the sad, or the broken. Back at home, you count the coins in your pocket and consider your options. Your cough is worsening. A visit to the apothecary might cost you your lunch money, but a visit to the hospital might cost you something far more permanent. You choose the apothecary, and he hands you a bottle of laudanum with a warning and a wink. "Just a spoonful," he says. You nod, not trusting the bottle or the wink. That night, you sleep heavily, drifting on the syrupy edge between rest and oblivion. You dream of cleaner cities, gentler doctors, and a time when your health isn't a game of dice. You know better, of course. The city is never still, not even in the quiet hours before dawn, when most of London lies under a thick quilt of fog and fatigue. You rise, rubbing the sleep from your eyes, and today, you set your sights on something most take for granted: shopping. Or, as it plays, out in Victorian London, an oddly theatrical experience in which money, manners, and mud all collide in a grand, often chaotic dance. You start small, literally, with a quick stroll through your local street market. It's barely past 6, but already vendors are shouting over one another, jostling for attention like unruly birds. Some shout prices, others sing them. You pass baskets heaped with turnips, bruised apples, and sprigs of herbs so wilted they might have been picked during the last century. Fish lay on cracked wooden slabs, glistening faintly, eyes wide and glassy as if surprised to still be here. Shopping here isn't just about what you need. It's about what you can afford, what's still fresh, and whether the vendor is having a bad day. Haggling isn't optional. It's survival. You try to knock a halfpenny off a bunch of carrots, and the woman behind the cart scowls. "These were alive this morning," she insists. You're pretty sure that's not how carrots work. Beyond the stalls, you duck into a small shop, a draper's, with bolts of cloth in all shades of brown and grey. A bell rings as the door creaks open, and a neatly dressed man looks up from his ledger. He greets you with forced cheer. Inside, the air smells faintly of wool, dust, and something vaguely like lavender soap. This is where people of modest means buy the cloth to sew their own clothes. Off-the-rack fashion isn't a thing unless you're flush with coin. The more well-to-do folks, of course, shop differently. You've passed by those glittering temples of commerce on Oxford Street or Regent. Street, windows gleaming, interiors gaslit to a warm golden glow. Places like Swan and Edgar or Marshall and Snellgrove cater to the middle and upper classes, where shopping is a genteel activity, almost a social ritual. One of these establishments even boasts a ladies' retiring room, a comfortable lounge with fainting couches and refreshments should the burden of spending money prove too great. You chuckle at the thought of needing a break between hat purchases. Then again, shopping for the fashionable elite is serious business. Fashion. Plates from Paris dictate the season's silhouette. Wide crinolines, nipped waists, bustles big enough to serve tea on. Historians still argue whether Victorian consumerism truly empowered women or simply gave them more things to trip over. If you're poor, your fashion is based on durability, not design. You patch, mend, and re-sew until your clothes are more thread than fabric. You might own 2 shirts, one you wear, one you wash. And washing is often just a good rinse in the nearest tub that doesn't have a rat swimming in it. Still, every now and then you find a gem at the second-hand stalls in Petticoat Lane or Seven Dials. A battered waistcoat with mysterious initials. A bonnet that still smells faintly of rosewater. Clothing carries stories here. And sometimes, fleas. You wander next toward Covent Garden, not just for the fruit and veg stalls, but for the sideshow atmosphere. Street performers twirl fire, sing ballads, or juggle knives with alarming proximity to your face. The crowd presses in, a living tide of shouting, laughing, pickpocketing humanity. You notice a man hawking miracle cleaning powder from atop a soapbox. He's got the charisma of a travelling preacher and the suit of a man who's used his own product. He offers a free demonstration, dabbing the stuff on a soot-black handkerchief. It vanishes in a puff of mystery. Applause. You're tempted. But you remember the last miracle tonic you bought. Your toenails still haven't forgiven you. You pass a shop selling spectacles, and you're reminded how many people go half blind for want of a proper lens. Vision isn't just a health issue, it's a class issue. You squint at the price in the window and move on. A strange little booth by the roadside catches your attention next. Tooth powder, imported from India, the sign boasts. Next to it, a tray of false teeth, slightly yellowed, all grinning up at the passerby like ghoulish trophies. You wonder if any of them once belonged to someone who could afford both sugar and a dentist. It's unlikely. In Victorian London, sugar is the sweetest kind of curse. As you reach the edge of the market, you spot a novelty, a vending machine. Not electric, of course, this is 19th century London, but a mechanical contraption where, for a penny, you can get a postcard, a peppermint, or even a collar stud. It's the future, apparently, though you're more interested in the fact that it doesn't require human interaction. One less scowl in your day. And then there are the department stores, tall, glowing monoliths of the new consumer culture. These places are as much theatre as they are shops. Everything is curated. Scent, sound, the elegant sweep of staircase. You once dared step into one and nearly tripped over your own oar. You remember polished floors, the strange quiet, the velvet-gloved attendants. Some say these new stores offer women a rare taste of freedom, spaces to wander, linger, inspect. Others whisper that they're just another trap, encouraging endless spending under the guise of leisure. Historians still argue whether shopping truly offered a social outlet or merely invented a new form of pressure. You buy a paper bag of roasted chestnuts from a corner vendor and nibble slowly as you make your way home. Your boots are soaked from sloshing through puddles. Your coin purse is lighter. But there's a strange satisfaction in the chaos of Victorian consumerism. Even if all you bought was an onion, a torn cravat, and some suspect peppermint lozenges, that tastes suspiciously like coal dust. By now, you've gotten used to the rhythm of the city, the clatter of hooves, the hiss of gaslights, the ever-present thrum of voices rising and falling like waves on a grimy shore. But today, you're heading into one of Victorian London's less tangible landscapes, one shaped more by ink and imagination than bricks and smoke. You're stepping into the peculiar world of print and press, of storytelling and scandal, of newspapers, pamphlets, and penny dreadfuls. You start with a morning stroll past a newsboy, no older than 10, face smudged with soot, shouting headlines in a practiced chant. Fire in Bermondsey, more bodies found in the Thames. You buy a copy, of course, not because you need to, no, but because, well, everyone does. The press is the city's heartbeat, even when it beats a little too fast and loose with the facts. London is absolutely crawling with print. Newspapers like The Times, The Morning Chronicle, and the Illustrated London News offer a window into high society and politics. But you're more likely to find yourself flipping through a penny paper filled with crime reports, moral tales, and the kind of stories you probably shouldn't read before bed. Or maybe especially before bed, depending on your taste. There's something democratic about it. For just a penny, you get a whole world, usually involving a mysterious murder, a fainting governess, and someone with a secret past. Literacy is spreading, and so is curiosity. You and your neighbors trade papers like playing cards, hungry for the next twist in the story. Sometimes people even learn how to read just to follow the serialized tales. And then there are the penny dreadfuls. Oh, those gloriously lurid, over-the-top serialized novels that scare the older generation and thrill everyone else. Varney the Vampire, Sweeney Todd, The Mysteries of London. You get one issue at a time. The cliffhangers so cruel they might as well be physical injuries. Will the villain escape? Will the hero survive? Probably not, but it's fun to pretend. Historians still argue whether these tales corrupted young minds or sparked literary curiosity. You suspect it's a bit of both. You once read one under your blanket by candlelight. The flame guttered, and you swore you heard footsteps just outside your window. It turned out to be a cat. Probably. As you wander through the streets, you spot something else. The humble pamphlet. Thin, cheaply printed, often passed hand to hand like illicit contraband. Everyone's got a message. Political tracts, religious conversions, health advice, recipes for penny dinners, instructions for preserving modesty, and tirades against moral decay. Some are printed by well-meaning reformers, others by wide-eyed lunatics. You collect a few. One warns about the dangers of corsets. You nod in sympathy. Another proclaims the end of days is near, based on chimney smoke and cheese prices. And a third offers a scientific system for improving your handwriting, health, and chances of marital success, all in 5 pages. You're tempted to write your own someday. Maybe The Miserable Rambler, one soul's journey through cold soup, muddy boots, and mildly haunted boarding houses. Catchy, right? The print boom doesn't stop at gossip and ghost stories. Satirical magazines like Punch lampoon politics, fashion, and the royal family. The illustrations are savage and smart. You once saw Queen Victoria depicted as a sour cabbage. Bold choice. But satire can get you into trouble. The government keeps a wary eye on printers and publishers, especially those who stir unrest. Some journalists have been fined, jailed, even beaten. But that doesn't stop them. Truth, or at least a juicy headline, must be told. You remember overhearing a debate in a coffee house between 2 gentlemen, one with spectacles sliding down, his nose and the other with ink-stained fingers. They argued about freedom of the press, whether the working class could handle the truth. Someone spilled tea on a telegraph. Tempers flared. It was glorious. Literacy, after all, is climbing. Public education is becoming a thing. The city is slowly realizing that reading isn't just for clergymen and scholars. Even chimney sweeps and laundresses carry dog-eared novels in their coat pockets now. Booksellers, too, line the streets, their shops dim and narrow, smelling of mildew and ink. You duck into one, secondhand, of course. Shelves groan under the weight of forgotten lives. The owner, a man with more beard than face, grunts a welcome. You browse. Shakespeare next to scandalous French novels, medical manuals beside ghost stories. A tiny handwritten sign reads, "Please do not read entire books in the store, unless you're quiet." You quietly read 3 chapters of something with a tragic heroine and a brooding duke. You leave a farthing on the counter and sneak out before guilt catches up. Print has power. It shapes opinion, incites revolts, and feeds the masses. The written word in London is both salvation and seduction. Whether it's the cry of a newsboy, the curled lip of a satirist, or the fevered imagination of a penny dreadful writer, the press keeps the city dreaming and screaming. That night, in Mahorndam, your tiny room with its drafty window and single flickering candle, you pull out your latest dreadful. The plot thickens. The hero is framed for a crime he didn't commit. The villain wears a cloak and speaks in riddles. The heroine faints for the 3rd time in 5 pages. You smile. Outside, the city roars and creaks and stirs. But on the page, anything is possible. You wake to the sound of rain pattering softly on the window pane, that gentle, familiar rhythm that seeps into the bones of Victorian London. The city, always damp, seems draped in a layer of silver mist. Today, you'll be moving in quieter circles, not through shops or markets or muddy streets, but among books and lectures, between the ticking of clocks and the scratch of chalk. You're exploring what passes for learning in this age, of empire, coal, and corsets. Let's start where you probably didn't, a ragged school. You duck your head inside the narrow brick building tucked between a chapel and a bakery, and instantly the smell hits you. Wet coats, ink, boiled cabbage, and hope. Ragged schools are free, charitable institutions designed for poor children, like you who'd otherwise be too busy surviving to learn to read. Inside, dozens of kids cram onto benches. Some are barefoot, most are hungry. The teacher, a woman with eyes far too tired for someone under 40, writes the alphabet on a slate. She pronounces each letter clearly, even as a boy in the back. tries to fish a dead mouse from his satchel. You admire her composure. Discipline is firm but fair. Usually. Corporal punishment is still legal, and while this school frowns upon excessive caning, not all do. Historians still argue whether Victorian education uplifted the poor or merely trained them to obey. You suspect it depends on the cane. If you're lucky enough to be of a higher class, or at least appear well scrubbed, you might go to a national or a British school. Uniforms, hymns, and rote memorization dominate here. You'll learn your 3 R's: reading, writing, and arithmetic. Geography too, if there's time. And moral instruction, of course, because no Victorian curriculum is complete without a stern warning about the perils of loafing, lying, or laughing too loudly. Girls and boys are often separated. Boys get extra math. Girls get needlework. You briefly wonder how embroidery helps with algebra, but move on before anyone asks you to solve for X while darning a sock. For the children of the elite, education takes on a grander form. Governesses and tutors teach at home in drawing rooms where the carpets cost more than most people's annual rent. Sons are prepped for public school. Public in this twisted logic, meaning elite and expensive. Think Eton, Harrow, Rugby. You've probably only seen their gates from afar, through a hedge, while wondering what they eat in there. Latin, Greek, history, classics. It's less about learning and more about status. Memorizing Ovid while wearing a waistcoat somehow signals that you're fit to govern the empire. Historians still argue whether this was effective preparation or just glorified babysitting with Latin declensions. And then there are the self-taught. You know the type. The man who works all day in a factory and reads by candlelight at night. The woman who listens to lectures at the Working Men's Institute, even if she's not technically allowed to speak. The city hums with quiet ambition. Public libraries are slowly spreading, though you still need a clean reputation to borrow. Books, and probably clean hands. You once saw a librarian glare at a boy for sneezing too close to the encyclopedias. Philosophy, science, history. These aren't just topics, they're escape routes. You pass by a lecture hall one evening and hear a man thunder about fossils and dinosaurs and the terrifying age of the Earth. People gasp. A few cross themselves. The world is changing, and not everyone is ready. You duck into a used bookshop later that week and discover a small miracle. A copy of A Treatise on Electricity and Magnetism with margin notes from a previous reader who seems to have gotten steadily angrier as the pages went on. You learn a little and laugh a little. Science education is a funny thing. It's spreading fast, but understanding is patchy. People know about germs now, sort of, but still treat colds with turpentine and licorice. There's growing awareness that the Earth isn't 6,000 years old, but try explaining that to your landlady. She believes fossils were put there by God to test her. Still, you can't deny the hunger for knowledge. Londoners love lectures the way modern folks love TV. Entire halls fill with people eager to hear about volcanoes, comets, criminal psychology, or phrenology. The dubious belief that you can read a person's character by the bumps on their skull. It's mostly nonsense, but they bring little plaster heads and feel each other's foreheads like nervous fortune tellers. You once pretended to have a bump of mathematical excellence. It didn't work, but it was fun. For women, learning is harder to come by. There are finishing schools, of course, where they master French, piano, and how to pour tea while maintaining eye contact. But real education, academic, scientific, political, is rare and hard-won. You once met a woman at a society lecture who whispered about applying to study at a new women's college. She looked thrilled and terrified. So did the men around her. You spend a rainy afternoon listening to a speaker at the Royal Institution. He talks about electricity as if it's magic. He lights a bulb, and the room gasps like he's just conjured a ghost, and maybe he has. The line between science and sorcery is thin in Victorian London. Of course, learning doesn't always happen. In formal places, you absorb things from gossip, from songs, from the rhythms of daily life. You learn how to read a landlord's expression, how to interpret a constable's silence, how to spot a counterfeit halfpenny at 20 paces. These aren't in textbooks, but they matter. Your favorite learning place, if you're honest, is the museum. The British Museum, to be exact. Admission is free. The halls are chilly. The glass cases house mummies, tools, pottery, and bones. You wander for hours, imagining the lives behind each artifact. You overhear a boy ask his father, "How did we get all this stuff?" The father replies, "We discovered it." You both know that's not quite true, but you keep walking. Knowledge in Victorian London is sprawling and uneven. It's everywhere and nowhere. It's printed on cheap paper and etched into marble plaques. It's passed hand to hand, whispered in corners, shouted in halls. And every day, someone, somewhere, learns something that changes the way they see the world. Maybe it's you. The fog has returned, not the gentle mist of morning tea or poetic melancholy, but that thick, soup-like yellow smog that creeps low to the ground and leaves a taste of coal on your tongue. You wrap your scarf tighter and peer ahead, barely seeing more than a few feet in front of you. Today, you're drifting through one of Victorian London's most pungent themes, the battle for public health in a city that sometimes seems determined to poison itself. You begin your morning, as many do, by not drinking. The water, the Thames after all, is no friend to your intestines. You recall the time you saw a dead dog bobbing past a rowboat, while a man nearby scooped water for cooking. Victorian London is full of rivers, but the big one, the Thames, has become a kind of tragic punchline. Locals even give it nicknames. The Big Stink, the Great Drain, that terrible soup. The city's rapid growth has outpaced its ability to clean up after itself. Most people dump their waste, household, industrial, and bodily, straight into the streets or into cesspits under their houses. When those overflow, which is often, well, gravity does its thing. By the 1850s, cholera outbreaks are all too common. Entire families fall ill within days. Children, the elderly, the poor, none are spared. Doctors don't yet fully grasp germ theory, though it's starting to emerge. Many still believe miasma, or bad air, is the culprit. And considering the air around here, you can hardly blame them. Historians still argue whether it was cholera or typhoid that struck down the East End worst in the epidemic. Either way, the smell was probably a reliable early warning. But then comes Dr. John Snow. No, not the one from the TV show. You won't find dragons here, just diarrhea. Snow makes a bold claim that cholera travels through water, not air. In a now famous moment, he removes the handle from a water pump on Broad Street in Soho, and voila, the outbreak stops. It's not magic, it's science and plumbing. You pass that spot today. There's a little memorial now. People walk by, without noticing, sipping from their bottled mineral waters, unaware that a missing pump handle changed the course of sanitation forever. Still, fixing the city is no quick job. Enter Joseph Bazalgette, a name that's less famous than it should be. A civil engineer with the patience of a saint and the stomach of a soldier, Bazalgette designs an enormous network of underground sewers. Over miles of piping stretching beneath the city like a kind of intestinal miracle. You imagine the map of it, like veins under the skin, hidden but vital. It takes years, decades really, but it works. The river starts to look less like soup and more like water. Barely. The smell remains, though less pungent. Londoners breathe a little easier. You walk past a bathhouse, another piece of the city's hygiene revolution. Most homes don't have their own baths, so public facilities spring up to help folks scrub off the day's grime. You step inside and immediately feel the thick humidity and hear the splash of buckets. Soap, hot water, and shared awkwardness. It's a different kind of community. A woman nearby is scrubbing her child, muttering about those fancy West End types with their rose water and bidets. You nod in agreement. You still wash with a rag, a tin basin, and whatever heat your stove can manage. Speaking of stoves, fire is another threat. You've heard the stories. Tenement buildings going up in flames like matchboxes. Fire brigades were once private. Yes, really. And they'd only help you if you had a metal plaque on your building showing you were insured. You remember watching one argue with a constable over whether the flames had crossed property lines. Now, the Metropolitan Fire Brigade is city-run. That helps. But you still sleep with one eye open and your boots near the door. Hospitals are another matter. You visited one, briefly and reluctantly. The air inside smelled of carbolic acid and quiet despair. Nurses, some trained by Florence Nightingale's new standards, move efficiently between rows of iron beds. The wounded moan softly. You saw a man lose a toe from frostbite and gain an infection as a parting gift. There's progress, though. Germ theory is gaining ground. Antiseptic techniques are spreading, if slowly. You overheard two doctors arguing recently. One insisted he'd washed his hands that week. The other called him a radical. You also walk by a chemist's shop. Apothecaries here are both miracle workers and quacks, depending on the hour. You can buy laudanum, arsenic pills, labelled complexion wafers, and mercury-based ointments, all without a prescription. You once saw a man pick up a bottle of cough syrup, read the ingredients, alcohol, chloroform, and opium, and say, that should do nicely. Mental health care? That's still in the dark ages. Asylums dot the outskirts of the city, and treatment often looks like punishment, isolation, restraints, cold baths. If you're a woman, a husband's disapproval might be enough to get you committed. Hysteria is the go-to diagnosis for everything from mood swings to ambition. And yet, despite the filth and fear, people survive. Somehow. You see children playing in alleys, women scrubbing their steps, men huddled at soup kitchens with hopeful eyes. There's resilience in every cough, every bandaged hand, every scuffed boot trudging down a foggy street. One final stop today, a cemetery. You step through the iron gates and crunch along gravel paths. Victorian cemeteries are ornate, dramatic, miniature cities of the dead. Angels weep, obelisks tower, and ivy coils around forgotten names. There's something oddly peaceful here. The air feels cleaner, if only because the dead don't add to the smoke. And then you remember, during the worst outbreaks, they buried the poor in mass graves, stack after stack, layer after layer. No markers, just a name in a ledger, if you were lucky. You take a breath, a real one. The fog is lifting just a little. Public health in Victorian London is a strange paradox. Deeply flawed, sometimes comically, misguided, but inching toward improvement. Through trial, error, and a lot of very bad smells, the city is learning to take care of its own. Sort of. You wake to a whistle, shrill, urgent, and unmistakably mechanical. The train is leaving the station, steam hissing from its iron belly like an irritated kettle. Today, you're tracing the lifeblood of Victorian London, transport and travel. It's loud, it's sooty, it's often late, and it's transforming how you experience the city. You start on foot, as most Londoners do. Your boots hit cobblestone slick with morning drizzle. Navigating this city is a daily workout. Streets twist like a bowl of spaghetti. Signage is inconsistent at best, and you constantly have to dodge carts, horses, and the occasional leaky barrel. But you've got options, assuming you've got a few coins. The first is the humble horse-drawn omnibus. It rumbles along the wide avenues, a mobile box on wheels, packed with passengers and the occasional squawking chicken. Inside, you're shoulder to shoulder with strangers. Some reading newspapers, others nursing hangovers. You hold on tight as the driver navigates potholes like he's chasing a bounty. Omnibuses run on set routes, but traffic is chaos. No lanes, no signals. Just a honking, neighing, bell-ringing ballet of unpredictability. You once watched three drivers argue at an intersection while a goat escaped from a nearby butcher and caused even more confusion. Honestly, the goat handled it best. If you've got a bit more cash, you might splurge on a handsome cab. It's the Victorian version of a rideshare, private, stylish, and priced for the mildly comfortable. The driver sits behind you, which means you're spared the full brunt of his pipe smoke, though you might catch a few of his creative mutterings. Hansom cabs zip through traffic with terrifying confidence. You once made it from Piccadilly to Shoreditch in record time. though you're still not sure how many red signals, or pedestrians, were ignored along the way. And then there's the Underground. Yes, the tube already exists. It opened in 1863, and even though it looks like an iron furnace mated with a mine shaft, it's wildly popular. The trains are steam-powered, which means riding them is like commuting through a dragon's throat. You emerge coated in soot, your lungs slightly more Victorian than before. Historians still argue whether early tube travel actually improved mobility for the working class, or just helped the middle class avoid walking through poor neighborhoods. Either way, you ride it when you can. It's fast, it's underground, and it smells like hot coal and damp wool. The trains themselves are marvels of engineering. Each screech of the brakes feels like a mechanical scream. You once rode next to a man who calmly pulled a boiled potato from his coat and began eating it like an apple. Honestly, that was the least strange part of the journey. Above ground, the city is laced with train stations: Paddington, King's Cross, Euston. These cathedrals of iron and glass welcome passengers from the countryside and beyond. You stand in the station, staring at the departure board, wondering where all these people are going. Brighton, Manchester, Liverpool. Places you've only heard about in overheard pub stories. Rail travel is still a novelty for many. Some older passengers bring snacks and prayer beads. Others bring an entire suitcase of bread, just in case. You board one train and sit near a woman who insists on clutching her hat every time the whistle blows. By the end of the journey, her fingers are cramped, but her hat remains perfectly positioned. Priorities. Goods move by rail too. Coal, textiles, fish, beer. London's markets rely on these shipments. Imagine Billingsgate without a morning rail full of cod. You once saw a train car full of eels. The smell lingered in your dreams for days. Of course, not all movement is public. The wealthy have their own carriages, private, polished, and pulled by glossy horses that likely eat better than you do. Some families employ a liveried coachman, complete with powdered wig and judgmental glare. You stepped too close to one once and got shooed away, like a particularly bold pigeon. For the working class, carts and wheelbarrows do the job. Delivery boys zigzag between pedestrians, balancing everything from pies to printing presses. You've seen a man move a piano using 2 planks and sheer nerve. There are other experiments too, odd contraptions and single-person buggies. You once spotted a velocipede, one of those early bicycles with an absurdly large front wheel. The rider tipped over immediately. Dignity was not injured because none was present to begin with. And let's not forget the river. The Thames is not just for waste and watery funerals. It's also a transport artery. Steamboats and ferries shuttle passengers from shore to shore. You take one on a sunny afternoon, just for the view. The water reflects the sky like a cracked mirror. Beside you, a man throws crumbs to the gulls and says, "Don't worry, they won't eat you." Probably. River transport is useful, especially when the streets are clogged, but it's not always reliable. You remember the day a ferry ran, late because of unexpected swan interference. No further details were given. Even walking gets a boost, thanks to bridges. London Bridge, Tower Bridge, Blackfriars. Some are sleek and new, others are crumbling testaments to historical optimism. You cross one as the fog rolls in and marvel at the city's layers. Old and new, steel and stone, feet and wheels. Travel isn't just about getting somewhere, it's about identity. How you move says who you are. A girl riding an omnibus to her job in a hat shop is different from the banker zipping across town in his coach. Movement is a kind of currency here. Yet everyone, regardless of class, occasionally finds themselves stuck behind a slow-moving cart filled with cabbages and sighs. That's the one universal truth of Victorian transport. No one escapes the cabbage cart. You wrap up your day on foot again. Boots muddy, but spirits light. Movement may be chaotic, but it's also freedom. Freedom to explore, to observe, to get lost and found again in the tangled streets of a city that never stops rolling forward on wheels, hooves, steam. and the occasional potato-eating train passenger. Tonight, your boots crunch softly on gravel as you make your way toward London's darker corners. Not dark because of crime or fog this time, but because they're filled with stories people often try to forget. You're slipping into the world of the poorhouse, the orphanage, and the workhouse. Institutions of charity, in theory. Warehouses of desperation, in practice. You've passed the gates of a workhouse before. Tall, imposing, and strangely quiet. There's always a dull greyness to the air around them, even when the sun is out. You never forget your first time seeing one up close. Children lined up, with empty bowls, their faces tight with caution. Not hunger, though there's that too. Always. Charity is complicated in Victorian London. The city believes deeply in the idea of the deserving poor. Not everyone qualifies. If you're healthy and penniless, people assume you're lazy. If you're ill, disabled, or a widow with children, maybe you'll earn sympathy. Maybe. But only if you behave. The workhouse is the official system. Designed after the Poor Law Amendment Act of 1834, it's meant to be so unpleasant that only the truly desperate go in, and they do. In droves. Because the alternative is starving. Inside, you're stripped of your clothes and your pride. Families are separated immediately. Men to one wing, women to another, children to yet another. You don't see your husband or your daughter again unless you're lucky, or unless someone dies. The food is plain and sparse. Think boiled potatoes, weak broth, and bread so dry it might have been leftover from the Napoleonic Wars. You eat it silently, under the gaze of the overseer. He always looks like he enjoys this a little too much. Jobs are assigned based on your health and perceived usefulness. Women sew, scrub, or do laundry, mountains of it from strangers. Men break stones, chop wood, or grind bones into dust for fertilizer. You remember one man who ground bones for 12 hours straight, only to receive half a loaf of bread and a watery soup as thanks. Historians still argue whether the workhouse system genuinely reduced poverty or just buried it under bureaucracy. Either way, it's hard to call it help when it feels like punishment. Outside of the workhouse, private charities operate too. Churches, local parishes, even some wealthy do-gooders sponsor soup kitchens and shelters. Some mean well. Others are more interested in converting your soul than feeding your stomach. You once attended a charity breakfast hosted by a missionary group. The food was good, if cold, and the preacher made you sit through 30 minutes of hellfire warnings before you could touch your porridge. You nodded, took your spoon, and tried not to fall asleep in the Lord's name. Then there are the orphanages. Ah, yes. The Victorian solution to childhood poverty. Remove the child, file the paperwork, and hope they become someone else's problem. The famous ones are almost glamorous by comparison. Dr. Barnardo's homes, or the Foundling Hospital. The reality is far less sentimental. You pass an orphanage near Whitechapel. The walls are high, the windows small. Laughter is rare. Children line up in grey uniforms, reciting verses or singing songs by rote. Discipline is strict. Smiles are earned through good posture and silence. One fringe tidbit. A few orphanages experimented with character points, where children earned tokens for moral behavior and could trade them for treats. Like virtue was a currency. One girl you knew saved 20 tokens for a candied orange peel. She got sick before she could eat it. They gave it to someone else. Adoption exists, but it's rare and often transactional. Some children are taken in as unpaid servants or apprentices. If you're lucky, your new household is kind. If not, well, no one checks on you. Still, some kids escape. Literally. You've heard of small hands slipping through iron bars or street-savvy teens climbing walls at night. Some return to the streets, which, as bleak as they are, offer freedom. Others vanish entirely, swallowed by the city. The almshouses are another tier altogether. Quiet rows of brick cottages, usually reserved for the elderly or disabled poor. A rare shred of dignity. You visit one now, passing small garden patches and neatly swept stoops. Inside, you find an old man polishing a pipe he's not allowed to smoke. Rules. Always rules. He tells you he used to be a carpenter, but his back gave out. His wife died in a fever. Now he lives here, grateful but lonely. He shows you a Bible he's had since 1821. He doesn't read it, he just likes holding it. A talisman against silence. Charity, of course, has its theatrical side. Wealthy Victorians love fundraising balls, charity concerts, and pamphlets filled with inspirational rags to redemption tales. There's a whole genre of literature, improving stories, where orphans grow up to be moral bakers or missionaries. Real life is more like hungry boy steals pie, ends up in jail, misses workhouse dinner, and repeats. And yet, even among the harshness, there are moments of kindness. A nurse who smuggles a roll into a sick child's pocket. A cook who pretends not to notice you slipping second helpings. A clerk who quietly records your sister's name on the visitor log, even though it's not visiting day. You stop by a soup kitchen before heading home. The line snakes around the block. No one talks. They know the rules. No shoving, no complaining, no lingering. You get your ladleful of pea soup and find a corner to sit. It's hot, and for the moment, that's enough. One woman nearby begins to hum, a tune you vaguely recognize, maybe a lullaby, maybe a hymn. Either way, it floats above the pots and boots and bone-deep weariness. You sip your soup. The spoon is cracked. Your knees ache. But you're warm, and in Victorian London, that's sometimes the greatest luxury of all. You're standing under a flickering gaslight, squinting at a painted sign that reads, "The Merry Badger." The door swings open with a creak, releasing a wave of heat, laughter, and the unmistakable smell of spilled ale and roasted turnips. Tonight, you're not walking the straight and narrow. You're about to tumble face first into the tipsy, rowdy, and often ridiculous world of Victorian leisure. Yes, even in a city that worships industry, people need to blow off steam. You step into the pub and immediately regret standing downwind of someone's gin-soaked hiccup. But that's the price of fun, especially here. The Victorian pub is the great social leveller. Dock workers, clerks, chimney sweeps and off-duty bobbies all elbow for space at the bar. You order a pint of something called Old Gutter Runner, a name that doesn't inspire confidence, but it's what everyone else is drinking, and peer pressure is eternal. The drink hits your throat like a coal cart, but you survive. A round. "You men!" shout at dominoes. A woman slams down a hand of whist, and in the corner, an old fellow tries to teach his dog to dance. You suspect the dog's winning. Leisure isn't always about alcohol, though let's not lie. It's a significant percentage. For families, there are music halls. These are the Netflix of their day. Cheap tickets, constant entertainment, and performers who know how to work a rowdy crowd. You attend a show in Camden. First act is a man who plays spoons on his knees. Second is a comic singer with a full fake beard and a chicken on her shoulder. Historians still argue whether these halls uplifted the masses or simply gave them more reasons to drink. Either way, the applause is genuine, and your cheeks hurt from laughing at a song about a boot thief who only steals left shoes. Then there's the promenade. Sundays in Hyde Park are a thing of beauty and judgment. Ladies in corseted dresses twirl parasols. Gentlemen twirl moustaches. You walk slowly, deliberately, like everyone else. Because promenade speed is less about getting anywhere and more about being seen by the right someone. In the distance, a brass band plays something vaguely military, while toddlers throw breadcrumbs at pigeons, and nannies judge one another silently. You overhear one say, "Her boy's socks don't even match." You look down at your own shoes. Mismatched. You shuffle away from her line of sight. For the working class, there are fairs and street shows. You stumble upon one outside Shoreditch, Acre, riot of tents, food carts, and shouting vendors. A man eats glass while balancing on a barrel. Nearby, a girl with a painted face sells caramel apples and whistles "God Save the Queen" through her nose. It's absurd, it's chaotic, and it's everything you didn't know you needed. You eat a questionable sausage roll and browse a fortune-teller's booth. She stares at your palm and says, "You'll die alone in a bakery accident." Honestly, that sounds better than dying in a workhouse. One odd little fad. Recreational spiritualism. Seances, ghost photography, table rapping. It's all the rage. You attend a séance out of curiosity, sitting in a darkened parlour while a woman in a lace veil moans dramatically. A table tilts, a bell rings, someone's wig falls off. You don't connect with any spirits, but you do get a pretty decent cheese biscuit on your way out. Of course, no list of leisure would be complete without the Great Exhibition of 1851. Held in the Crystal Palace, it's the Victorian world's idea of a theme park, minus the roller coasters, and plus a whole lot of brass gears and taxidermy. You walk through vast halls filled with inventions, sculptures, and weird colonial artifacts, including a giant diamond and a life-size papier-mâché elephant. You spend 15 minutes staring at an industrial loom before realizing you're blocking the Prince of Prussia. He smiles, you nod. It's a moment. For nature lovers, there are the botanical gardens, the zoo, or simply rowing on the Thames. You try rowing once, it goes poorly. You end up turning in circles for 10 minutes and finally drift into a group of ducks that seem mildly offended by your incompetence. Still, the parks are peaceful. You stretch out on the grass under a horse, chestnut tree, and watch the clouds drift by. Children laugh in the distance. Someone plays a tin whistle. You almost doze off until a squirrel attempts to steal your lunch. Home leisure has its charms too. You attend a parlour evening with a family you know. There's tea, card games, and a dramatic reading of Wuthering Heights that somehow makes Heathcliff sound more like a grocer with an attitude problem. It's cosy, awkward, and the only drama all week that didn't involve actual arrests. Literacy is rising fast, so reading for pleasure becomes common. You borrow a penny dreadful, a cheap, thrilling serial filled with highwaymen, haunted crypts, and melodrama so rich it practically drips off the page. You devour 3 chapters before realizing you're late for your actual job. And then there's sport. Cricket for the proper folk, football for the rising masses. You wander past a match in progress, 2 teams in mismatched uniforms, half the spectators shouting advice, the other half betting on whether the ball will land in someone's pint. Spoiler, it does. The rules? Vague. The commitment? Fierce. One man plays on a twisted ankle because this is the championship, Dave. You don't know who Dave is, but he's very proud of that limp. A final note on leisure. It's hard-earned. Whether you're a servant with a rare Sunday off or a clerk sneaking 5 minutes behind the shop, those slivers of time mean something. They're rebellion, release, a reminder that life isn't only about soot and coins. You return to your boarding house late, still humming a music hall tune under your breath. Your boots are muddy, your hands sticky from toffee, and your pockets filled with nothing useful, but you feel oddly full. Not with food, not with gin, but with something like warmth. And that, here in Victorian London, is about as good as leisure gets. You're walking along the muddy edge of the Thames, shoes already soaked, when a distant whistle breaks the silence. A low rumble follows, like thunder, but it's not a storm. It's progress. Steam hisses, metal shrieks, and the silhouette of a locomotive cuts through the morning fog. Welcome to Victorian London's most unpredictable thrill ride, the age of transport. Let's start with the streets. You can't escape them. They are chaos, alive with clatter and curses. Horse-drawn omnibuses lumber by, wheels rattling in, potholes. You try to cross, but a man shouting, "Move it or lose it!" barrels past in a 2-wheeled hansom cab. The driver barely glances at you. Apparently, pedestrians are expendable. The horse is still king, but he's overworked and undershowered. London's estimated 300. Horses produce an astonishing amount of manure. So much that people once feared the city would drown in it. Literal rivers of dung. The smell? Not subtle. You don't really get used to it. You just stop noticing after your nose gives up. For the middle class, cabs offer privacy and speed. Though they're bumpy, loud, and always just a bit too expensive. You try one, briefly, riding inside a rattling box with leather seats, hearing every cobblestone thump through the wooden wheels. You hit your head twice and tip the driver with your last copper. Regret comes free of charge. But by the mid-century, steam starts changing everything. The railways slash through farmland, extend suburbs, and create the very idea of commuting. The first time you see Paddington Station, you're struck by its sheer size. The iron and glass roof arches like a cathedral built to worship timetables. You buy a third-class ticket, cheap, wooden seats, no frills, and board a train heading toward Croydon. The engine bellows. People around you clutch hat boxes and baskets of eggs. One man holds a chicken wrapped in a shawl. You resist the urge to ask about it. The train lurches forward. The countryside blurs. You feel motion like never before. Fast, relentless, slightly terrifying. A child screams with joy or fear. It's hard to tell. You arrive in under an hour. What once took a day by coach is now a quick jaunt. You've just time-travelled, essentially. Historians still argue whether railways improved lives or just spread the city's problems more efficiently. Either way, you can't unring that steam-powered bell. Back in town, omnibuses rule the day. They carry up to passengers, pulled by a pair of increasingly annoyed horses. You hop onto one from Fleet Street to Oxford Circus. The conductor takes your fare with a grunt. Seats are wooden benches, no shocks. You bounce with every jolt, like you're riding a stubborn whale. You notice the clear social pecking order. Wealthier folk upstairs in the open air, where the wind tangles your hat, and poorer riders crammed below, coughing in time with the hooves. Then there's the underground. Yes, the tube exists. Even in the 1860s, you descend into a gloomy station lit by gas lamps. The walls sweat. The smell is part coal smoke, part wet wool, part something you'd rather not define. This is the Metropolitan Railway, the world's first underground line. The train roars in like an angry dragon, steam-powered, loud, and hot. You step inside a wooden carriage lit dimly from above. There are no windows, only the noise of iron scraping against brick, echoing through tunnels barely wide enough to hold the beast. People faint occasionally. It's fine. Someone always has smelling salts. And yet, the thrill is undeniable. You're underground, moving through the bowels of the city like a mole with a timetable. You emerge in Baker Street, a bit singed, slightly dizzy, but impressed. Deep-level electric trains won't arrive until decades later, but you can already feel them coming. Outside, you try a cab again. This time, a more modern growler, so named for the growling noise its iron wheels make on the stones. It's less a ride and more a drawn-out dental procedure. Still, you arrive in one piece, and let's not forget walking. It's still the primary mode for most Londoners. You walk everywhere, to work, to the butcher, to the pub, and always while dodging muck, elbows, and rogue dogs. You develop a sixth sense for puddle depth. Shoes are crucial. Good boots mean the difference between surviving a drizzle and sinking to your knees in soggy despair. One fringe tidbit. Some Victorians swore by cork-lined soles, insisting they provided not just insulation, but spiritual elevation. You try a pair. They squish oddly and smell faintly of soup. River travel holds on too. The Thames is still a lifeline. Watermen row people across the river in tiny boats, charging a few pence and risking their backs. You take a short ride from Bankside to Westminster. The water is grey and sluggish, and the boatman hums sea shanties between spitting into the tide. At one point, you pass a coal barge named Queen of the Grime. You nod in respect. Not all transport is official. Costermongers push carts full of eels or oranges, shouting their wares while weaving between traffic. Messengers on foot or bicycle tear through alleys, flinging letters with surprising accuracy. Even children get involved, offering piggyback rides across flooded crossings for a halfpenny. It's all a little disorganized, a little dangerous, but it works, in its own anarchic way. One day, as you're watching a pair of lads race coal carts down Ludgate Hill, you hear a new sound, bells, hooves, and the metallic jingle of harnesses, a fire engine. The early kind, with horses pulling a massive water pump and men clinging to the sides like action heroes in tall hats. You step back just in time as they rumble past. The fire's somewhere in Southwark. You see the smoke rising. Already. You follow, half running, boots slipping on cobbles. By the time you reach the scene, The building is ash, but the crew is already hosing down embers, their coats soaked, their faces streaked with soot and determination. Transport in Victorian London isn't elegant. It's not clean, but it's constant. Always groaning, steaming, creaking forward, like the city itself. You return home tired, grimy, and deeply appreciative of your own 2 feet, though you suspect they won't forgive you until next Tuesday. You're deep in the winding back alleys now, just past the edge of polite society. The gas lights are fewer, the air damp with something unnameable, and the sounds more fragmented. Soft footsteps, a tin pail dropped in the distance, the muted sob of someone you'll never meet. Tonight, you're stepping into the shadowy world of Victorian crime, punishment, and the institutions meant to keep it all in check, or at least try. Let's start with the bobbies. You hear their boots first, sharp, purposeful. A pair of uniformed officers passes you, oil lamps swinging from their belts. Tall hats, stiff collars, and an expression that says they've seen everything twice and haven't slept in days. They're part of the Metropolitan Police Force, born in and affectionately nicknamed after Sir Robert Peel. They don't carry guns, just truncheons and a whistle, and the quiet hope that no one has a brick handy. You ask one what the worst part of his job is. He shrugs and mutters, "Drunk chimney sweeps in November." You don't press. The bobbies are everywhere, but they're thinly spread. So crime, naturally, thrives. Pickpockets, coin clippers, and con artists move like ghosts through the crowds. You walk through 7 dials and immediately feel 3 hands near your coat. You clutch your meager wallet and pretend you're not terrified. One of them grins at you and offers to sell you your own pocket watch. But not all crime is petty. There are gangs, tight-knit groups of ruffians with colourful names like the 40 Elephants, yes, an all-female shoplifting ring, and the Wild Boys of Bethnal Green. You overhear a story of a turf brawl involving umbrellas, fish guts, and an unfortunate accordion. Historians still argue whether these groups had real structure or were just chaotic cliques with matching scarves. For those caught red-handed or red-pocketed, justice follows. Sort of. You sit in on a session at Bow Street Magistrates Court. A man is accused of stealing sausages. The sausages, oddly, are present in court as evidence. The judge sighs deeply and sentences him to a week's hard labour. You wonder if the sausages will get parole. Speaking of sentences, the Victorian justice system is a stew of reform and repression. The days of public hangings are fading, though not gone. And transportation, to Australia mostly, is still a favoured punishment for serious offenders. You meet a young man awaiting transport for burglary. He seems excited to see a kangaroo someday. You don't have the heart to tell him most transported convicts never come back, or see many kangaroos for that matter. Then there's the prison. You visit Coldbath Fields first, an older jail turned model prison. It's bleak. Rows of tiny cells, all echoing with silence. Prisoners wear masks to prevent conversation. You see a man doing crank labour, turning a heavy metal handle over and over to no purpose. A warder explains, it builds character. You suspect it builds resentment and wrist strain. Pentonville, opened in 1842, takes things a step further. It's designed for the separate system. Solitary confinement, hours a day, with 1 hour for exercise. You observe prisoners walking in circles, faces hidden by cloth hoods. One stumbles and is corrected by a guard with a stare so cold, it could freeze tea. It's psychological punishment in an era just beginning to understand psychology. But the Victorians also believe in reform, at least theoretically. Philanthropists visit prisons to hand out Bibles and tracts. You sit in on a lecture entitled Temptation and Turnips, a Moral Parable. A few inmates nap openly. One cries quietly. You don't ask why. Juvenile crime gets special attention. Reformatories crop up, often run by charities or churches. You visit one on the outskirts of town. The children are thin, mostly barefoot, but better fed than you expected. They're being taught to sew, read, and in one case, cobble shoes. You try stitching leather and immediately prick your finger. The boy next to you rolls his eyes and mutters, "Soft hands." Not all policing happens with whistles and boots. Enter the detective. In 1842, Scotland Yard establishes its first detective branch. These men wear civilian clothes, blend into crowds, and possess the kind of moustaches that inspire confidence or fear. You meet one at a pub near Whitechapel. He won't give you his name, but tells you that half the job is drinking tea in silence until someone talks too much. You ask about Jack the Ripper. He goes quiet, then says, "Too late, too dark, too clever." That's all you get. One fringe tidbit. Some people believe in phrenology, the idea that you can read a criminal's tendencies by feeling the bumps on their skull. You get yours read in a side alley by a man with an alarming number of teeth. He tells you you're destined for minor fraud and good at embroidery. You consider taking it as a compliment. Crime stories sell newspapers like hotcakes. Penny dreadfuls and serialized court reports keep the public hooked. You buy one with the headline, "Woman stabs lover with hairpin." The details are thin, the drama thick. You wonder if any of it's true. Londoners are obsessed with crime. They read about it, speculate on it, reenact it in amateur plays. One night, you attend a criminal tableau in someone's parlour. Essentially a mannequin-filled diorama of a famous robbery. It's weird, macabre, and kind of impressive. Despite all this chaos, there's one curious thing. Crime rates aren't as apocalyptic as you'd expect. They rise and fall with unemployment, policing, and weather. Yes, weather. Rainy months see fewer crimes, too soggy to pick pockets or start fights. Who knew? You finish your evening standing at the edge of Newgate Prison, watching the building loom like a stone accusation. It's closed now, but its history clings to the walls like mould. This is where executions once drew cheering crowds, where debtors wasted away, where famous criminals became folklore. London, you realise, is a city both fascinated and terrified by its own darkness. It pokes at its shadows with one hand while lighting gas lamps with the other. A balance of order and chaos, of bobbies and burglars, of justice and sausages. You wake up to a morning fog that clings like a damp blanket, and your throat still tastes faintly of last night's ale. Today, you're diving into Victorian London's health and medicine, the good, the bad, and the downright weird. You're about to see why staying alive here sometimes feels like a lucky dice roll. Start with the city's air, or lack thereof. The fog isn't just weather, it's a cocktail of coal smoke, horse manure, and industrial grime. Londoners call it pea soup fog. When it thickens so badly, you can barely see your own hand in front of your face. It settles into every nook, every alley, every breath you take. Scientists still argue whether the fog directly caused certain illnesses or just made life more miserable. You suspect it does both. You decide to visit a hospital, St. Bartholomew's, one of the oldest in the city. Walking in feels like stepping into another world. Gas lamps flicker weakly. The air is thick with the smell of antiseptic and something less identifiable, maybe fear. Patients lie on iron bedsteads, faces pale, eyes glassy. You watch a doctor examining a woman with cholera, a disease that strikes fast and hard, leaving victims dehydrated and desperate within hours. Cholera is the big villain here. The city has been hit by several terrifying outbreaks, turning crowded slums into death traps. The problem? Water contamination. The Thames, a vital artery, doubles as an open sewer, and you wouldn't want to drink a drop unless you enjoy involuntary vomiting. You overhear doctors debating whether cholera is caused by miasma, bad air, or germs, a question still unsettled among medical experts. It's like a science mystery unfolding in real time, with lives hanging in the balance. In between, you witness some odd medical practices. One doctor insists on bleeding patients, a holdover from medieval times. You cringe as a patient, loses more blood than sense. On the other hand, you spot a midwife using a primitive but promising technique to assist childbirth, something called forceps, which promises less agony and fewer dead babies. You also learn about the rise of anesthesia. A young woman is prepped for surgery, and the doctor offers ether, a substance that makes patients unconscious. She drifts off peacefully, and you marvel at this miracle. Yet, anesthesia is still controversial. Some think it interferes with God's plan, while others celebrate it as a sign of progress. Then, there's the smallpox vaccine, pioneered by Edward Jenner decades earlier, but still a mixed bag. You meet a family debating whether to vaccinate their children. The practice is spreading slowly, often resisted by those suspicious of needles or government mandates. Mental health is another puzzle. Lunatic asylums are filled with patients whose conditions are poorly understood. You visit one such asylum and hear whispers of moral treatment, gentle care intended to calm rather than chain. Yet, stories abound of cruelty and neglect, blurring the line between help and harm. Among the quirky facts, many Londoners swear by crocodile dung as a sunscreen. Yes, actual dried crocodile droppings ground into powder. It's supposed to protect against burns, though it smells predictably like a swamp in July. You also learn about the spitting cure, a bizarre remedy where patients were encouraged to spit as much as possible to expel bad humours. You try not to gag while imagining the practicality of this. The city's doctors and nurses are overworked, underpaid, and fighting against ignorance, superstition, and the city's own filth. Nighttime hospital wards are eerie, dim lamps casting, long shadows on faces grim with exhaustion but fierce with determination. You pause to think about how far medicine has come, and yet, how much still feels like fumbling in the dark. Victorian London is a place where science and superstition wrestle in the same bed, and you're caught somewhere in between. You step out into the sprawling green spaces, a rare luxury in this dense city, and breathe deeply. Today, your journey takes you to Victorian London's parks and leisure, places where the city's frenetic pace softens, and people attempt, however briefly, to forget the grime and chaos. Hyde Park sprawls before you, a patch of wild calm amid stone and soot. You watch families picnic on the grass, children chasing pigeons, and couples gliding across the serpentine lake in swan boats. You join the rhythm of laughter and occasional yells as someone's kite gets hopelessly tangled in a tree. Parks weren't just for fun. They were designed with health in mind, to give Londoners fresh air, a taste of nature, and a momentary escape from disease and overcrowding. The parks are an experiment in urban planning, a public good born of social reformers' idealism. You find a bench and watch a group of men playing cricket. The sport is a gentleman's game, slow and strategic, but it's catching on among the working class too. You overhear a debate about whether cricket should be professional or remain a pure pastime. Historians still argue if this was the beginning of sports commercialization or just a passing fad. Nearby, a small band tunes up for a concert. The strains of brass and strings float lazily across the grass. Music halls and open-air concerts are becoming popular as affordable entertainment, a way for the city's vast population to gather without needing a theatre ticket. You stroll to Regent's Park, where you spot the newly opened zoological gardens. It's not just a collection of exotic animals, it's an educational and scientific hub where Victorians satisfy their curiosity about the natural world. You gape at the giraffes, tall, awkward, and surprisingly serene. The zoo is also a stage for Victorian eccentricity. One keeper insists the penguins understand human speech and performs elaborate penguin dances to entertain visitors. You're skeptical, but entertained. Sports facilities are popping up too. You try your hand at lawn tennis, a game invented recently and gaining popularity for its fast pace and relative accessibility. You fumble with the racket, and a young woman nearby laughs softly. Victorian leisure isn't always graceful, but it's enthusiastic. One quirky pastime, mudlarking, searching the riverbanks for lost treasures during low tide. You find bits of pottery, old coins, and once, an entire clay pipe. Mudlarks are often children or the desperate poor, but collectors and historians treasure their finds. You imagine the stories those bits of flotsam could tell. As evening falls, you visit a public house, the heart of social life for many. The air inside is thick with smoke, laughter, and the scent of ale. You listen to regulars swap stories about cricket matches, local gossip, and the latest theatre scandal. You catch snippets of a heated argument about the morality of music halls. Some see them as harmless fun. Others claim they encourage lascivious behaviour. Victorian society is always balancing its desire for pleasure with its obsession with propriety. Parks also host public speeches and demonstrations. You wander to Speaker's Corner in Hyde Park, where anyone can stand on a soapbox and rant about politics, religion, or the weather. You hear a fiery orator denouncing the government's failure to fix the sewer system. The crowd listens, some nodding, others jeering. As night deepens, gas lamps cast pools of yellow light, and you feel the city's pulse slow. Parks empty. The laughter fades. Still, for a few hours each day, these green spaces offer a breath of freedom, a chance to dream beyond smoke and stone. Victorian London's leisure is a mosaic of the earnest, the eccentric, and the essential. It's where the city's many voices momentarily blend, where exhaustion meets exhilaration, and where, just maybe, the future begins to take shape. You find yourself drifting through the quieter corners of the city now, ears still echoing with the laughter and music of yesterday's parks. But this morning, the streets feel different. It's Sunday. A hush blankets the city, interrupted only by the soft toll of church bells calling out over rooftops. Today, you're exploring the deeper soul of Victorian London. Its faith, philosophy, and what its people believe lies beyond the fog and filth. Religion shapes nearly every part of life here. Walk down any street, and you'll spot spires and steeples poking through the skyline like watchful eyes. The Church of England stands tall. As the official religious institution, and most respectable households attend at least one service a week, sometimes for spiritual reasons, sometimes because it's simply what you do to stay out of gossip. You pop into a small parish chapel. The pews are packed, voices rising in hymn, the smell of beeswax candles mixing with damp coats. The sermon is heavy on sin and redemption. The vicar's voice is calm but firm, reminding everyone that earthly suffering prepares the soul for heavenly rewards. You notice a few people nodding off, a few clutching handkerchiefs in silent tears, one child sneakily passing a licorice drop to his sister. But not everyone finds comfort in the traditional church. This is also the age of doubt and rethinking. You overhear two young men debating Darwin's On the Origin of Species in a coffee house. One says it's nonsense, the other calls it liberation. Historians still argue whether Darwinism truly shook the core of Victorian belief or merely whispered at the edges. You note silently, sipping your weak tea. The rise of science and rationalism hasn't killed faith, but it's certainly given it some competition. Spiritualism blooms in that uncertain gap. Seances become wildly popular. You find yourself at one, sitting in a dark parlour while a medium murmurs to the spirits. A table shudders slightly. Was it a ghost, or just the nervous leg of the man? Next to you, no one's quite sure, and everyone kind of likes it that way. Victorians love belief systems. If it has rules, rituals, or riddles, someone's into it. There's Methodism, Quakerism, Catholic revivalism, Unitarianism, and, more fringe, Swedenborgianism, which involves detailed maps of heaven. You run into a group of vegetarians who also believe in the coming of space angels. You politely decline their lentil stew. Religion is serious business, but it's also performative. Clergy compete for the biggest audiences. Sermons are printed and sold like celebrity memoirs. Some churches host elaborate musical services just to stand out. At one chapel, you hear an organist play a version of God Save the Queen so dramatic you nearly stand up and salute. You walk into a Jewish synagogue tucked away behind a row of shops. The congregation is smaller but deeply rooted. Many Jewish families in London are recent immigrants, and faith is both solace and shield. In the East End, you see mosques forming among Muslim dockworkers, and signs of small Hindu and Sikh communities building quiet places of prayer. London is becoming more layered by the year. Then there are those who reject organised faith altogether. The freethinkers meet in smoky basements, questioning the logic of eternal damnation and praising the rise of reason. You listen to one speaker argue that moral behavior doesn't require divine punishment. He closes with a toast to kindness, without fear. You nod quietly. You visit a charity hospital run by a group of devout women. Their faith compels action, feeding the sick, housing orphans, comforting the dying. One nun tells you, God is in the boiled potatoes. You smile. It makes more sense than you'd like to admit. One curious note. Victorians are obsessed with death, but they treat it like an art form. Memorial cards, hair jewelry, elaborate gravestones. Mourning etiquette is so strict, it could be its own religion. You pass a mourning outfitter's shop where entire black outfits are on display, including veils long enough to trip over. Even grief, here, has a dress code. You stroll through Highgate Cemetery, where ivy curls around old headstones and statues of angels weep eternally. People picnic here, oddly enough. Death is so normalized, it becomes background scenery. You pass a family spreading jam on scones beneath the shadow of a crypt. Some Victorians write detailed wills, not just to divide property, but to plan their own funerals down to the music. One left instructions to be buried with a shovel in case of mistake. You can't decide if it's paranoia or good planning. And then, in the distance, you hear it. Church bells again, ringing out the hour as smoke begins to rise from chimney stacks, and children's laughter returns to the street. The sacred and the mundane, layered on top of each other like soot on glass. Faith, doubt, ritual, reform, all coexist here, sometimes clashing, sometimes quietly ignoring one another. London believes in many things, often at once. In God and ghosts, in reason and ritual, in tea and salvation. By day's end, your coat smells of incense and cabbage, and your head swirls with questions. Maybe faith is just another kind of fog in this city, thick, complicated, and impossible to ignore. You wake to a rare moment of stillness. The morning mist lies like stretched cotton across the rooftops, and a lone cart creaks down the cobbled street outside your window. Today is your last full day wandering through Victorian London, and it's time to peer into its future. Well, their future, your present. This city of grime and grandeur is on the brink of everything. You walk slowly through the streets you now know by scent and sound, past the rag and bone men calling for scraps and the clatter of hooves on stone. The city is teetering. Change buzzes faintly, like static in the air. You pass a construction site for a new railway station, iron beams stacked high, workers shouting over steam-powered cranes. The Industrial Revolution isn't over, it's just shifting gears. Steam gives way to electricity. You spot wires stretching across rooftops like taut spiderwebs, early telegraph lines whispering across great distances. Soon, there will be phones. One man tries to explain the concept to a small group. You speak into a device, and someone far away hears you. They stare like he's just described sorcery. At the newspaper stand, headlines shout about Queen Victoria's aging health. Everyone's wondering what the end of her reign will mean. Will the empire hold, or fracture under its own massive weight? Historians still argue whether her death marked the true end of an era, or whether change had already been crawling quietly forward for decades. You duck into a tea house where students argue about socialism, women's suffrage, and the rights of labourers. There's excitement in their voices, an impatience with tradition, a hunger for something fairer. You overhear a woman say, "We're not property." Heads turn. She doesn't flinch. These are the early murmurs of revolution. Not the violent kind, but the slow, unshakable kind that starts with questions no one's willing to answer. Out on the streets, you see new technologies creeping into everyday life. Sewing machines hum behind shop windows. Typewriters clack in newspaper offices. Photographs, no longer stiff portraits, now capture real life. Street vendors mid-shout, couples kissing, children dirty and free. Even the grime of London becomes art through this lens. In a back-alley bookshop, you thumb through pamphlets about the future of cities. Some dream of clean air, public transport, glass buildings reaching for the sky, others warn of overpopulation and social collapse. Victorian London looks ahead with one eye squinted, unsure whether it's squinting at the sun or oncoming traffic. One inventor tries to pitch you on the idea of a horseless carriage. Like a carriage, but with a motor. It sputters once and dies. He shrugs. Give it 5 years. You believe him. Children still play in the streets, dodging horse droppings and each other. But a few now go to school full-time. Education reforms are creeping through Parliament. It's slow, inconsistent, often wildly unfair, but it's happening. A future where more children can read, write, and maybe imagine a life not spent in a workhouse is flickering into view. You pass a coal merchant's stand and hear whispers of gaslighting being replaced with electricity. A few posh households are already testing it. People fear it might burn down their homes, or worse, steal their souls. You file that under Victorian fears slightly ahead of their time. At the museum, you marvel at exhibits showing modern marvels. Telegraph, machines, model trains, even early motion pictures, a few seconds of a man sneezing. The crowd claps as if they've just seen the moon. You smile. Give them 100 years and someone will be live streaming a sneeze in high definition. You end the day by the river, watching the Thames churn lazily in the golden light. Bridges arc across it like stitches trying to hold the city together. You think about everything you've seen, the stink and the splendor, the soot and the silk, the hunger and the hope. Victorian London isn't just a place, it's a question. What happens when a city tries to carry the past and future on its back at the same time? The people here don't know what's coming. World wars, decolonization, the internet. But they feel something coming. You can see it in the way they walk, talk, build, protest, and dream. That's the thing about the future. It doesn't arrive all at once. It trickles in like fog, unnoticed until it's everywhere. You glance back one last time as the light fades. London coughs, sighs, and shuffles on. Still alive, still dreaming, still building the future, brick by coal-dusted brick. Wind down, 300 words. So now, here you are, still, resting. The city you've wandered through, its clamour, its chaos, slowly slips behind your mind like the tail end of a dream. Victorian London, once so loud and crowded, now softens at the edges. The streets grow quiet. The lamps flicker low. Somewhere far away, a carriage door clicks shut and is gone. You find yourself alone on a quiet corner, the fog wrapping around your shoulders like a warm shawl. It's all slowing down now. The footsteps, the factory noise, even the river seems to hush itself. And you too can breathe a little slower. Remember the clatter of the workhouses, the whispered prayers in the chapels, the rush of children chasing kites in Hyde Park. Let it all blend together into a gentle hum now. All those voices, all that dust, all that living. It's behind you, like pages in a book you've finished, but still hold in your hand. Let your body soften into stillness. Let the night carry you forward, not with the noise of steam or the crack of cobblestone, but with the soft rhythm of breath and the steady ticking of time. You've seen it all now, survived the soot, sidestepped the cholera, even danced around a séance or two. You made it. No need to do anything more. Close. Your eyes. Let the gas lamps dim, let the echoes fade. Just rest now. You're home. Close. Your eyes. Let the gas lamps dim, let the echoes fade. Just rest now. You're home.